Chapter 140. The flower boats swayed, and there was a hubbub of voices. The bustling crowd came and went. Some were excited, and some were disappointed. It was a bustling scene. This was the busiest night in the imperial city. The successive wars of Great Xia had put too much pressure on the people. On this night, they all chose to temporarily forget their worries and enjoy themselves to the fullest. Ning Chen held little Mingyu's hand and walked into the nearest flower boat. The first thing that entered his eyes were two gorgeously dressed ladies and four burly men. The screen on the boat was decorated with lights. Under the bright red lights, an eye-catching couplet made the people who entered scratch their heads. Holding back my tears to look for red, tender as water. Just 9 short words. There were no traps between the lines. It was just a couplet with a deep meaning. It looked simple, but it was actually quite difficult. Mingyu felt dizzy. Although she had learned some of the culture of the Central Plains, it was mostly about the 4 books and 5 classics and how to rule a country. She basically did not learn the specialties of these scholars and beauties. Do you know how to do it? Mingyu asked softly. Yes. Ning Chen thought for a moment before answering. After which, he picked up a piece of paper on the table and wrote down the answer. Dancing with clear shadows, thin bones facing the wind. Mingyu read it softly. She did not understand, but it seemed to be very powerful. After handing over the paper, a voice sounded from behind the screen, "Pass." The crowd instantly let out a cry of surprise. The way they looked at the youth in front of them changed. The 2 brothel ladies bowed and said respectfully, "Young master, this way please." "Thank you." Ning Chen nodded in return. Then, he pulled little Mingyu to another flower boat. The flower boats in the Yin River were all connected. After passing the first test, one could cross the bridge between the boats and board the second test. There were also many people gathered on the second test. They all came from different boats. The couplet for the first test stopped a lot of people, but many people passed. However, when Ning Chen brought little Mingyu over, he saw that everyone was frowning as if they had encountered a big problem. There were still 2 beautiful ladies and 4 men on the boat. They were guarding a screen. This was the question for the second test. On the screen, there were 5 words written clearly: Wing Chun does not see spring. This was a poem composition question, and the difficulty was obviously much higher than the previous one. Many of the scholars fell into deep thought. The Confucianism of Great Xia was flourishing, and there were many scholars. However, going too far was just as bad as not going far enough. After the Confucianism reached its peak, it showed signs of decline. The scholars now were not as good as before. Most of them were reluctant to part with the false reputation they had left behind in the brothel. The ancient style no longer existed, and the number of true scholars was becoming fewer and fewer. The 2 of them stopped in front of the screen for a moment. "Will you?" Mingyu raised her head and asked again. "Yes," Ning Chen replied. When the people who were still thinking saw someone raise a pen to answer, they immediately gathered around. Pei returns to the light snow, as if cherishing the bright sun, don't understand the cold wind and flowers, turn over Ling Mei Lu Chi. The 5-character quatrains that were vividly written on the paper did not contain a single word of spring, but they described the scenery of winter leaving and spring coming in vividly. Good poem. Everyone present had some knowledge of poetry. They could tell at a glance that the poem was outstanding. The young man in front of them was a genius. After the answer was sent to the screen, the result quickly came out. There was no superfluous words. There was only one word: pass. Ning Chen and little Mingyu successfully passed again. Under everyone's envious gazes, they walked to the next flower boat. "Who is this person? Why haven't I seen him before?" someone asked curiously. "That's right. Logically speaking, such a talented person shouldn't be unknown," a blue-clothed man around 30 years old replied. "Unfortunately, I forgot to ask for his name," the previous person said regretfully. "Forget it. There's no point in thinking about this. Let's think about how to pass this stage first," the blue-clothed man replied. At this time, many people who had passed the first stage had begun to gather on the boats for the second stage. After seeing the questions, they all shook their heads. This year's questions were even more difficult than last year's. But behind the screen, another voice of rejection rang out. In a short while, this was already the seventh person. There were good and bad poems. It wasn't as if one could pass just by writing it. It's so difficult. Who can pass? A newcomer complained. Shoo, lower your voice. Someone already passed, the blue-clothed man beside the young man said. So fast? The young man was shocked. The blue-clothed man whispered a few words into the young man's ear. Immediately, the young man was so shocked that his mouth fell open. How come I've never heard of such a person? The young man was very puzzled. I don't know. Right now, everyone is guessing who this person is. The blue-clothed man shook his head. Ning Chen, who had already left, naturally didn't know what was happening behind him. At this time, he and little Mingyu had already boarded the third boat. Can you? Mingyu subconsciously asked when she saw that the bad guy wasn't speaking. No. Ning Chen vigorously shook his head. The third stage's question was actually to write a scholarly essay. Wasn't this asking for his old life? It's a free point, Mingyu said with astonishment. I really can't. Ning Chen blushed with shame. He could write a couple of poems, but writing a scholarly essay was really impossible. Then I'll do it? Mingyu softly asked. All right. Ning Chen nodded. Mingyu stepped forward. Without thinking too much, she directly started writing. In a short while, she wrote a scholarly essay neatly, causing Ning Chen to be stunned. This child wasn't raised for nothing. The essay was delivered to the screen. After a while, an old voice sounded out, your literary talent isn't bad. Pass. Of course, don't you see whose child you are? Ning Chen very proudly said. He looked happier than if he had passed himself. After passing the 3 stages, the 2 of them were the first to board the last big boat. Mingyu was a child and didn't take up a spot. She just had to follow the adults. The 2 of them worked together perfectly. Passing the 3 stages was as simple as drinking water. After quietly boarding the big boat, they quietly found a corner to sit down. Inside the boat, the figures of rich and powerful people could be seen everywhere. They all came with invitations. Ning Chen swept his eyes over them. He basically didn't recognize any of them. The second floor of the boat was filled with private rooms. The beaded curtains blocked the figures behind. Sitting in one of the private rooms, one could overlook the stage below where the courtesan belle selection was held. These were all people with real status. It was impossible for them to casually show their faces. Lingyan Pavilion had also taken this into consideration and specially arranged these private rooms. Has the Jiming Marquis not arrived yet? In a private room on the second floor, Su Fei Yen asked. No. A maid replied. The private room of the Jiming Marquis was still empty. Moreover, the person in charge of checking the invitations had not seen the Jiming Marquis arrive. Su Fei Yen frowned. This didn't make sense. How could the Jiming Marquis not come? Send someone to continue waiting. Once there is news, immediately report back. Yes, Mississippi, the maidservant bowed and quickly retreated. In the corner of the banquet, the woman in charge of pouring wine looked at the 2 people in front of the table strangely. There were actually people who went to the brothel to take care of children. It was said that rich and powerful people had many strange habits. When is it starting? Mingyu looked at the stage in the center of the banquet and asked. Don't worry, it should be soon. Ning Chen replied softly. Before he finished speaking, the sound of a zither rang out. Immediately, the entire boat quieted down. The sound of the zither was faint, quietly seeping into the hearts of everyone present. Ning Chen quietly drank his wine. Thoughts flashed through his mind. This Su Fei Yan's identity was really hard to fathom. Just by using the sound of the zither, she was able to affect people's minds. This kind of cultivation technique was rare. It seemed that when he returned, he would have to ask his seniors to see if he could obtain any useful information. The sound of the zither was very pleasant to listen to. It was like a clear spring. Ning Chen had 2 heavenly books protecting him, so he was not affected by the sound of the zither. As for little Mingyu, with his qi in her body, there was no need to worry. It's nice. Mingyu raised her head and said very softly. Eat something first. I'll take you to see her in a bit. Ning Chen patted the little girl's cloth hat and said. Okay. Mingyu obediently replied and immediately continued to eat. They had come out in a hurry and had not brought their invitations. They had not eaten dinner. Adding on the fact that they had just composed a poem and written an essay, they were really hungry. At this time, on the stage, 10 women floated down along with the red silk. They were all wearing blue embroidered clothes. Their faces were different, but they were all exceptionally beautiful. Accompanied by the sound of the zither, they began to dance. Everyone's gaze was immediately attracted to them. They were unable to take their eyes off them. Ning Chen and Mingyu raised their heads and glanced at them. Then they lost interest and continued to eat. The 2 of them had seen too much dancing. There was no lack of singing and dancing in the palace. This mangosteen is so hard. Mingyu held a stalk of mangosteen. After pinching it for a long time, she still could not open it. Here. Ning Chen took it and crushed it. Then he fed it to the little girl one by one. Mingyu did not feel embarrassed. She took it and ate happily. It's quite sweet. Ning Chen also stuffed a piece into his mouth and commented. Mangosteen was not easy to preserve. It spoiled easily. Only the rich and powerful could eat it. On the side, the maid looked at the 2 of them and her expression became even more strange. The 2 of them had been eating since the beginning and did not care about anything else. Their behavior was too strange. Ning Chen's skin was so thick that it was hard to measure. He did not care about the maid's opinion at all. As for Mingyu, as an empress, she could not care about everyone except for the people she cared about. It was unrealistic for an empress to consider the thoughts of a servant. Is the Marquis Jiming here? Seeing that the competition could not be delayed any longer, Su Fian's hand stopped playing the zither. Reporting to Miss, he hasn't. A maid respectfully replied. Don't wait any longer. Let them begin. Su Fian frowned and ordered. Yes. The maid accepted the order and left. In the corner of the banquet, hearing the zither music disappear, Ning Chen raised his head. His eyes narrowed and he softly reminded, Mingyu, it's about to begin. As soon as his voice fell, on the stage, 5 beautiful figures slowly descended. Their red clothes were like blood. They were so beautiful that people could not take their eyes off them. When the 5 of them arrived at the same time, their superior temperament and appearance instantly caused the surrounding 10 beautiful figures to lose their splendor. Chapter 141. Each of the 5 most beautiful women in red had a breathtaking appearance, especially the one in the middle. She was so beautiful that it was suffocating. The zither in the middle played softly. Her enchanting figure was accompanied by a beautiful sound, making her the most dazzling figure of the day. The 4 women in red danced, their red sleeves moving together, shaking everyone's minds. Since ancient times, it was no wonder that heroes were attracted to beauties. Beautiful women were a source of trouble. This was not because the women were evil, but because the men's willpower was often weak in front of beautiful women. Most of the people present were disciples of nobility and never rejected women. But when they saw the beautiful figures on the stage, their gazes were completely drawn away. Buy one and bring it home, Mingyu softly advised the 5 women in red. There was not a single dancer in the manor, so it was quite boring. These people looked pretty good and could be used to pass the time when they were bored. No money. Ning Chen shook his head without hesitation. His salary was personally set by Zhang Sun. At most, it was just enough to cover the manor's expenses. He did not know how Zhang Sun calculated it, but there was not a single bit left for him. Ming Yu was a bit depressed. This was indeed a big problem. They really did not have any money. She had been the emperor for 7 years, but this was the first time she had seen such a miserable marquis. The salaries of court officials were usually fixed. She had never seen someone like this who even had his salary controlled. Not long after, the courtesan competition began. As expected, the results were decided by the votes of the people present. However, this vote was not for free. It was bought with money. The 5 women in red on the stage were all famous courtesans in the imperial city. They had a large number of suitors, and among them were not ordinary nobles. Spending money was never a problem. "I'll give you 10 taels to play with." Ning Chen took out a small ingot and gave it to Ming Yu. "I choose the one in the middle." Ming Yu happily took the ingot. Young Master Ling offers 300 taels for Miss Lu. Young Master Li offers 700 taels for Miss Chu. Young Master Yu offers 1,000 taels. Voices rang out one after another, each bringing up a shocking number. It had to be said that the nobles in the imperial city were all rich. Throwing away 1,000 taels of gold was not just for show. The brothel had always been a bottomless pit for spending money. Young Master Ming is giving 10 taels of silver to vote for Miss Lu. At this moment, a surprising voice sounded from the corner of the banquet. Everyone was stunned and subconsciously looked over. The maid who was reporting the number looked a little nervous. On the second floor, Su Fian was also startled when she heard this voice. She immediately stood up and walked to the front of the curtains. Looking at the 2 figures in the corner of the banquet, her eyes unconsciously narrowed. So, he had already arrived. At the corner of the banquet, Ning Chen felt the gaze from the second floor. He raised his head and smiled. In the end, the woman in red who was playing the zither in the middle won with an absolute advantage and won the title of top beauty. Lu Ruoxi, a good name. What a pity. Ning Chen glanced at the woman on the stage and sighed. He didn't say anything else. No matter how beautiful a woman was, there would be a time when her beauty would wither. In a land of prostitution, the higher one was held, the harder one would fall in the end. The previous courtesans did not have a good ending. It was already an honor to be able to marry into an influential family as a concubine. If they were unlucky, it was very likely that they would be chased out of the house after they grew old. This sigh was Ning Chen's pity for the fate of such a beautiful woman. However, it was only this sigh. Everyone had their own path and he didn't want to change anyone. Today, she was playing the zither on the stage while he was admiring below. This was their fate, nothing more. At this time, a steady and heavy voice sounded from the second floor. Miss Ruoxi has also learned the graceful dance. How about she dance for everyone? This suggestion is very good. Another voice came from another box, agreeing. During the banquet, everyone immediately agreed and requested the new courtesan Belle to perform a graceful dance for everyone. Ruoxi, please. On the high stage, Lu Ruoxi bowed to everyone. Her beautiful face carried a slight trace of weakness, causing people to feel a desire to protect her. In the next moment, her red dress rose and her long sleeves covered her face. She danced with light steps. At first, she was slow, but later, she became faster and faster. Her red dress was like the most beautiful butterfly. In the most beautiful years of her life, she was trying her best to bloom with her brilliance. The graceful dance was the most difficult dance in the world. In the past, Su Feiyan's graceful dance had shaken the world. Today, she reappeared again and was still so stunning that people couldn't take their eyes off her. Everyone was intoxicated by her beauty. After tonight, it would be difficult to forget. Swish! At this moment, a bright sword light flashed in front of everyone's eyes, piercing towards the beautiful figure dancing on the stage. It was so sudden that no one could react in time. Ning Chen saw it, but he didn't make a move. On the second floor, Su Feiyan also didn't make a move. Her calm eyes were ruthless and indifferent. Time seemed to stop. On the high stage, Lu Ruoxi's eyes shrank fiercely. Her beautiful face turned pale, but she was powerless. She could only watch as the sword light came closer and closer. This was the cruelest world. In the face of scheming and scheming, the life of a weak woman was not worth mentioning. At the final distance, Lu Ruoxi closed her eyes in despair. Perhaps, this was a good result. Ding! In the end, the sound of the zither still rang out. The assassin's sword was affected. It deviated by 3 inches and pierced Lu Ruoxi's shoulder. Blood splattered everywhere. During the banquet, everyone finally reacted. A few military disciples immediately rushed forward and fought with the assassin. In the corner, Ning Chen was still quietly drinking wine. It was as if all this had nothing to do with him. "Are you not going to help?" Mingyu asked softly. "No need." Ning Chen shook his head. "Oh." Mingyu nodded and didn't ask any more questions. Behind the curtain on the second floor, Su Fei Yen looked at the indifferent Ning Chen. Her eyes narrowed. What a good Marquis. This self-control and coldness made her have a whole new level of respect for him. There was no doubt about Lu Ruoxi's charm. No one could have predicted this sudden attack. However, under such circumstances, the martial Marquis of Great Xia was still able to remain indifferent. If he wasn't truly cold-blooded and heartless, then he was truly too calm. It turned out that there were men in this world who could resist the temptation of beauty. Fan Lingyu's secret was a pity. If the hero didn't save the beauty, then the rest of the play would be difficult to continue. Su Fei Yan's fingertips once again plucked the strings of the zither. On the high platform, the assassin was hit in the chest by a military disciple. Blood spurted out and the assassin fell straight down. The scene was chaotic for a while. However, Ning Chen and Mingyu still sat quietly in the corner, watching this farce. "Young lord, young lady invites you." After a long time, a young girl dressed as a maid walked over and respectfully bowed. Ning Chen stood up, not surprised at all. He had never thought that this was just an ordinary courtesan's gathering. Su Fei Yen would definitely send someone to invite him. This was an unquestionable matter. The maid walked in front while Ning Chen pulled little Mingyu behind her. Because of what happened just now, everyone's attention was attracted and no one cared about the three's departure. On the second floor, behind the beaded curtain, 2 people sat. One was Su Fei Yen and the other was Lu Ruoxi. Looking at them from a close distance, the injured Lu Ruoxi's expression was somewhat weak. She looked even more lovely. After Ning Chen and Mingyu arrived, Su Fei Yen spoke. "Ruoxi, you can leave first." "Yes." Lu Ruoxi bowed and immediately retreated. Su Fei Yen poured a cup of tea and placed it in front of Ning Chen. Intentionally or unintentionally, she asked, "What does young lord think of Ruoxi?" Ning Chen picked up the tea and lightly said, "Miss Su should know my background. No matter how beautiful a woman is, it is useless to someone from the palace. What if young lord has never been cleansed?" Su Fei Yen suddenly asked. Pang! The teacup shattered and spilled onto Ning Chen's hand. A trace of blood overflowed from the broken porcelain. "Miss must be joking." Ning Chen took the handkerchief from little Mingyu and gently wiped it. There's no need to resort to insinuations in front of a straightforward person, and Fei Yen has never liked to joke about serious matters. Having said that, Su Fei Yen once again poured another cup of tea and handed it to the young man. "Ruoxi has reached the age where she should be married. Sooner or later she'll be sent away. If young master doesn't like her, then she'll only end up being a plaything." Su Fei Yan's words were cruel, but they were also the truth. A woman would always age and decline. After all, a woman from a brothel had a disgraceful identity and was destined to not have a good ending. However, the current Lu Ruoxi was at the peak of her beauty. There were many people who wanted to take her into their arms. Nodding at this time would undoubtedly be a big favor. The tea was delicious, sweet and bitter. Ning Chen took a sip and calmly said, "What does it have to do with me?" Then, Ning Chen got up and said, "Miss Su, if there is nothing else, then I will take my leave. The time is late and Mingyu still needs to rest. Su Fei Yen was startled for a moment, but after a moment, she returned to her senses. Softly smiling, she didn't urge him to stay. Qiu Lan, send young lord off. Yes. A woman in a luxurious dress walked in and answered. No need to go through so much trouble. Ning Chen said, refusing to be sent off. After the two left, Qiu Lan asked with a puzzled expression, Miss, why didn't you ask him to stay? We know too little about him. Rashly trying to rope him in may have the opposite effect. I didn't expect him to be so indifferent towards Ruashi's matters. Su Fei Yan's delicate brow wrinkled. This Ji Ming Marquis was far more difficult to deal with than she had imagined. Then what about Ruashi? Qiu Lan thought for a moment and couldn't help but ask. Send her to the Ji Ming Marquis mansion. If the Marquis doesn't accept her, then bring her back to Matchmaker. Whether she wants to receive guests or give her to the rich and powerful, it's up to Matchmaker. Su Fei Yen carefully tidied up the tea set on the table. Clang! In the box next door, the sound of something falling rang out, causing Qiu Lan to frown unhappily. This girl's burden is getting bigger and bigger. She actually dared to eavesdrop on their conversation. At the tea table, Su Fei Yan's mouth curved up into a beautiful arc. Half of her face was covered by drooping black hair, making it difficult to see clearly. Chapter 142. The night was like water. Ning Chen stood quietly in the courtyard of the residence for a long time, as if he was petrified, motionless. Beside him, an ordinary sword was stuck in the ground, nothing special about it. He was waiting for the best opportunity. He was also thinking about where he went wrong. In today's courtesan assembly, Su Feiyan gave him a big surprise. Very few people knew about his secret of not being cleansed, and they were all trustworthy people. The only exception was Fan Lingyue. If it was really Fan Lingyue who sent out the news, then this matter was worth thinking about. In the world, there were not many people who could catch Fan Lingyue's eye. If Su Feiyan had the ability to make a deal with him, then this woman's background might be more terrifying than he imagined. Su Feiyan's intention to rope him in was obvious. On the surface, the Lingyan Pavilion was working for the 10th prince, but he always felt that it was not so simple. The change of ownership of the Lingyan Pavilion came too suddenly. Su Feiyan had been hiding in the imperial city of Xia Kingdom for so long, it was impossible that she was just a secret chess piece of the 10th prince. The battle for the throne of Xia Kingdom had reached the most intense moment, and it was not surprising that there would be any changes. What he needed to do was to do everything possible to keep the changes out of the picture. Zhang Sun gave him the commander's seal of the Dragon Guards. It could be said that he had put down the greatest trust and power, and he could not afford to let it down. The road from the palace gate to the heavenly mandate hall was his bottom line. Before the situation was clear, no one could think of stepping in. The night was getting darker, and the brightly lit imperial city was also gradually dimming. Ning Chen was still standing in the courtyard, waiting for the opportunity to come. Mingyu was sleeping soundly in the house, hugging the big doll she bought, sleeping very sweetly. The little girl was excited for the whole day, and was also very tired. After returning, she quickly fell asleep. It was more than half an hour, and this was the most tiring time for a person. However, the figure in the courtyard put on the devil mask, pulled out a sword, and moved quickly in the direction of Yinhe. In the night, a black figure flashed by, and before anyone could react, it had already disappeared. On the Yin River, the flower boats had already docked. After the people left, there was a desolation after the bustle. In the Lingyan Pavilion, Su Feiyan, who was preparing to rest after a tiring day, suddenly felt a chill all over her body, as if she was being watched by something dangerous. Swish! Bright sword light appeared, resplendent to the extreme. It was unknown how many times stronger than the sword today. This was a truly breathtaking sword, making people's hair stand on end. Su Feiyan did not see the figure behind the sword. She only saw the dazzling sword light. Her mind was extremely focused. With a flip of her hand, the spring lightning zither appeared. The zither spun and with a clang, it blocked the fatal sword. A single string stuns the eyes. A string was plucked, and the sound of the zither was heard. A purple brilliance spread out and closed in on the intruder. The earth suddenly trembled, and a stone slab flew up. With a bang, it collided with the purple brilliance, blocking the power of the string. As the shockwaves spread out, the two of them took a step back and temporarily separated. Miss! At this moment, Chiu Lan, who was next door, pushed open the door and entered. When she saw the black-clothed figure in front of her, her face was filled with anger. Be careful. Su Fei Yan's expression was solemn as she reminded. The person who came was not ordinary. Today, there would most likely be a fierce battle. Under the Yiksha mask, the corners of Ning Chen's mouth curled up slightly, flashing the coldest smile. The scroll of the earth was activated, and a dark yellow brilliance shone brightly. The floor of the room started to change under the influence of the scroll of the earth. It started to shake violently. Chiu Lan was the first to move. She flipped her sleeves and sent a palm strike. Su Fian responded, and the spring lightning zither plucked two strings. The purple brilliance appeared again and turned into circles of ripples that spread out. Ning Chen did not move. The long sword in his hand slashed down. The sword was swift and fierce, scattering the purple brilliance. At the same time, their palms met. With a bang, they met Chiu Lan's attack head-on. Ugh! The strong and unshakable power made Chiu Lan unable to withstand the huge force. She retreated a few steps and vomited blood. Su Fian's expression changed. She no longer held back and plucked all four strings. The purple thunder sounded like 1,000 birds chirping. The surrounding tables and chairs exploded and turned into pieces in the lightning. For strings cry, purple thunder frightens the gods. The valiant move turned the entire room into a purple thunder world. The thunder rumbled and roared. Facing Su Fian's shocking ultimate move, Ning Chen once again activated the Earth Scroll. A vast amount of true Qi was activated. The shattered floor flew in front of him and turned into a huge wall. The thick earth was poured into it, and in a moment, it solidified. In the next moment, the purple thunder crashed into the huge wall. The sky was filled with shattered stones. The aftershock was so strong that even Ning Chen was unable to withstand it. He retreated 3 steps and the qi and blood in his body became restless. On the other side, Su Fian was not feeling well because she had forcefully activated the power of the 4 strings. Her true qi was severely depleted, and the 4 fingers on her right hand were bleeding. Retreat. His goal had been achieved. Ning Chen was not willing to fight anymore. He moved his feet and quickly retreated. Chiu Lan wanted to chase but was stopped by Su Fian. Don't chase. You are not his opponent. Chiu Lan stopped and looked at Su Fian. She asked, Miss, where did this person come from? I couldn't tell. From the beginning to the end, he had been deliberately hiding his moves. I didn't expect that there was such a strong person hidden in the Imperial City. Su Fian said seriously. The strength of the person who came was beyond imagination. If not for the fact that he could not use his full strength, he would have been even more terrifying. Now the situation was a bit troublesome. Her skills had already been exposed and this could become a hidden danger. The night outside was getting darker and darker. After Ning Chen left the Lingyan Pavilion, he quickly rushed forward. After a long time, seeing that no one was chasing him, he stopped and took off the mask on his face. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth and dyed the evil ghost mask red. Although he had blocked the last move, it had affected his old injuries. Ding! Suddenly, the air around him condensed and a bell rang. Ghost Qi gradually rose and a ghostly palanquin came from the distance. The black and white impermanences opened the way while Oxhead and Horseface carried the palanquin. With each step, they rapidly approached. Ghost Woman. Seeing this strange scene, Ning Chen was startled and his expression changed. Young man, I trust you have been well since we last met. From within the palanquin, a voice came from far away. It was thin and cold, causing people to involuntarily shiver. Ghost woman, this is the human world. It is not a place you should have come to. Ning Chen's expression gradually became cold. I have come to take back the earth scroll that belongs to the underworld. From within the palanquin, the ghost woman spoke. I didn't think that the one who took the earth scroll that day would be you. You found the wrong person. Ning Chen coldly said. Even if you deny it, it is useless. Today, I will definitely take the earth scroll away. Before she finished speaking, the palanquin stepped forward. The black and white impermanences, Oxhead and Horseface stepped forward. In the blink of an eye, they were already 3 zhang away from him. Ghost Desolation Art, 100 ghosts trapped the heavens. 100 ghosts appeared and a cold wind whistled. One after another, ghostly figures flew out from the palanquin. In the blink of an eye, they trapped the surrounding area. Ning Chen retreated, his expression heavy. It seemed that when he had fought with Su Fian, he had exposed the secret of the Earth Scroll. He didn't think that the ghost woman would be so sensitive to the Earth Scroll. What was troublesome now was that the injuries in his body were showing signs of flaring up. Moreover, he had never fought with anyone from the underworld before. If they fought, he was afraid that he would be at a disadvantage. Thinking of this, Ning Chen took a step forward and rushed forward. His sword pierced towards the figure in the palanquin. The situation was unfavorable. He had to end this quickly. Ling Ling, the black and white impermanence's morning staffs rang out as they struck towards the newcomer. Ning Chen was unmoved. He flipped his palm and knocked away the 2 morning staffs. His figure quickly approached the palanquin. Ding, the sound of metal and stone rang out. Oxhead used his body to block the palanquin. He was as firm as a boulder. The longsword was unable to advance even an inch. Unbreakable body again. Ning Chen coldly snorted. He withdrew his sword and used his palm. With a bang, his palm landed on Oxhead's body. Immediately, a huge force spread out and sent Oxhead flying. There was no longer any obstruction between the two. Ning Chen rushed into the palanquin. His sword followed him as he drew out the most dazzling rays of light. Broken soul, inside the palanquin, a ghostly light blossomed and welcomed the sword light. Boom! The collision of the 2 extremes caused the most terrifying shockwaves. The palanquin was unable to withstand the huge force. With a bang, it shattered and scattered in all directions. The ghost woman appeared. She was wearing a bright red wedding dress. Her head was covered with a red veil and her face could not be seen clearly. Only the cold ghostly chi around her body caused people's hair to stand on end. Caw! An ear-piercing sound rang out. The long sword in Ning Chen's hand shattered into pieces. Before it even fell to the ground, it was quickly turned to dust by the ghostly chi. I'll say it one last time. Hand over the earth scroll. Under the red veil, her bright red lips opened. Impossible. Ning Chen was still unmoved as he coldly replied. Then die. The ghost woman's body moved. Her slender white hand reached out and stabbed towards Ning Chen's dantian. Ning Chen did not dare to hold back. His aura erupted as he activated the 2 scrolls of the heavenly book. With a bang, he met the attack with his palm. A martial Marquis versus a ghost woman. This was the most powerful battle below the innate stage. The brazen power shook the surrounding ground. Cracks appeared on the street, extending for dozens of feet. 100 ghosts sealed the sky. There was no way out. Ning Chen had no choice but to fight his way out. In this brilliant battle, half of the street was destroyed. The ground was destroyed and the houses collapsed. It was a scene of devastation. The ghost woman's strength was shocking. Her every move was astonishingly powerful. Even though Ning Chen had 2 scrolls of the heavenly book and his foundation was unparalleled in the world, it was still difficult for him to fight. Just as the 2 of them were locked in a fierce battle, a pair of calm eyes slowly opened in the Yen Prince's mansion. Clang! The green sword flew out from the sword rack. It turned into a shooting star and swept towards the battlefield. In the next moment, the green sword fell from the sky. With a bang, it cut through 100 ghosts and annihilated the ghostly chi. The ghost woman's expression changed and she quickly retreated a few steps. People from the underworld should not appear in the human world. Leave, Prince Yen said calmly in Prince Yan's manner. 3 disasters expert. The ghost woman's body turned cold. Her heart trembled. There was actually such a terrifying expert in the Grand Xia Imperial City. Senior, this child has the underworld scroll of the earth. I must take it back, said the ghost woman respectfully in the direction the green sword had come from. Ning Chen, return it to her, said the Yen prince calmly. Hearing this, Ning Chen's expression became difficult. After a long time, he sighed softly. He activated his cultivation and forced out the scroll of the earth from his Dantian's Qi. The shattered golden paper floated in front of him. Its golden light was brilliant, but it was much dimmer than when it had been whole. Take it. Ning Chen waved his hand and the golden paper flew back into the ghost woman's hand. The ghost woman took the shattered scroll of the earth and frowned slightly. However, she still bowed solemnly. Many thanks. I owe you a favor. There's nothing to talk about. Bye-bye. Ning Chen was a bit depressed. He waved his hand and walked away. Chapter 143. Returning the Earth Scroll, Ning Chen's heart was filled with regret. Although he had already memorized the mantras and moves inside, this was something that he had risked his life to obtain after all. Returning it just like that, he was really unwilling. However, since the senior had already spoken, he could only endure it. Ah! How depressing! After taking 2 steps, Ning Chen still felt unbalanced in his heart, so he walked back. Upon seeing Zhang Xian's return, Demonis was taken aback as well, not understanding what was going on. Why don't we continue fighting? If I win, you can return the scroll of earth to me, Ning Chen suggested seriously. In Prince Yan's residence, Prince Yan smiled faintly. He didn't care anymore and slowly closed his eyes. This brat is starting to cause trouble again. Let him do as he pleases. The green sword hummed and turned into a shooting star as it flew back from afar. With a clang, it entered the sword rack. On the other hand, Ghost Girl was a little confused by the young man's sudden change in thinking. For a moment, she didn't know how to answer. It's almost dawn. I have to go back. A moment later, the Ghost Girl came back to her senses and tactfully refused. Are you afraid of light? Ning Chen asked curiously. I'm not afraid. I just don't like it. The Ghost Girl shook her head. Ning Chen nodded thoughtfully, and then asked, I want to know, is there really a red spider lily in the underworld? Yes. The Ghost Girl nodded. 100 years ago, I saw one on the other side of the Yellow Springs. However, it was destroyed by the Underworld Child. Underworld Child. Ning Chen frowned. This was the first time he had heard this name. The Ghost Lady waved her hand, and a ghost pearl condensed from Ghost Chi appeared. This is the Netherworld Pearl. It can avoid the poison of the weak water. If you want to find the red spider lily, you can come to the underworld to find me in the future. Ning Chen unceremoniously took the ghost pearl and put it away. It would be a waste not to take it. Compared to the scroll of earth, he had suffered a great loss. Where is the entrance to the underworld? Ning Chen asked. The place where you entered hell for the first time, 300 kilometers to the west, at the end of the misty forest. As soon as she finished speaking, ghostly light rose from her body. The shattered ghost palanquin seemed to have sensed her presence and reassembled itself, returning to its original state in the blink of an eye. Oxhead and Horseface lifted the palanquin, and the ghost girl entered. The black and white deities cleared the way, and they left step by step. Be careful of Underworld Child. This was the final warning. As the figure gradually disappeared into the distance, Ning Chen stood at the same spot for a moment before he also left. In Prince Yan's mansion, Ning Chen walked over. The butler opened the door and welcomed him in. Senior. For the sake of the throne, these two people had gone crazy. The waning moon moved westward and the night was coming to an end. Ning Chen returned to his room and wrote a note before sending it to the imperial court. 2 hours later, the sun had risen. Outside the door, a guard ran in to report. Marquis, the 10th prince sent someone to deliver an invitation. Please come to the front hall. I will be there shortly. Ning Chen said. Yes. Not long after, Ning Chen arrived at the front hall of the Marquis' mansion. When he saw the two women, he did not look surprised. The invitation was placed on the table while Lu Ruoxi stood quietly to the side. Her peerlessly beautiful face had a touch of weakness as she faced the unknown future, causing one to feel pity for her. Qiu Lan stepped forward and bowed. Marquis, the 10th prince knows that the Marquis' mansion still has no dancers, so he sent Ruoxi here to express his sincerity. I will accept the invitation, but you can take her away. Ning Chen calmly said. Lu Ruoxi's face was slightly pale as she knelt and said, Marquis, Ruoxi has reached the age of marriage. I can either receive guests or be sold to influential officials. The best result is that I will be sent away with some silver when I grow old. Ruoxi does not dare to have any extravagant hopes. I only ask for a place to stay. I hope the Marquis can fulfill my wish. Lu Ruoxi's eyes were filled with tears as she pleaded. At this moment, she no longer looked like a courtesan, but a pitiful woman who only wanted a place to stay. No one could bear to refuse. As long as one was a man, no one could deny Lu Ruoxi's charm. As a courtesan, her alluring appearance and enchanting figure were enough to make all men go crazy. However, this was an era that paid attention to matching social status. No matter how beautiful one's appearance was, it could not cover up their low status. Without someone to protect them, they would only end up as a plaything. So what? What does that have to do with me? It was still a simple sentence without any emotion. Ning Chen was not moved at all, showing the coldest side of human nature. Hearing this answer, Lu Ruoxi's tender body trembled, her face turned pale, and tears unconsciously flowed from her eyes. See them out. Ning Chen lightly said. Yes. At the front door, a guard walked in and immediately stretched out his hand, motioning for the two to leave. Qiu Lan and Lu Ruoxi had no choice but to leave with the guard. Before leaving, Lu Ruoxi once again looked pleadingly at Ning Chen, but all she received was the most ruthless indifference. Young miss, it's a failure. In the Lingyan pavilion, Qiu Lan looked at Su Fei Yen who was playing the zither and respectfully reported. Oh? He still refused? Su Fei Yen stopped playing the zither and thought for a moment, in that case, let's give him to the matchmaker. Behind Qiu Lan, Lu Ruoxi's tender body trembled fiercely. Kneeling down, she pleaded, young lady, please give me another chance. No need, go and prepare. From today onwards, everything will be arranged by the matchmaker. Facing Lu Ruoxi's pleading, Su Fei Yen coldly refused. With her last hope shattered, Lu Ruoxi's face instantly turned ashen. Her beautiful eyes were empty, without a trace of light. After the courtesan assembly, the Yin River was still very lively. Flower boats flowed, and talented scholars and beautiful women shared a drink and enjoyed the beautiful scenery. The 10th prince arrived, and after a short conversation with Su Fei Yen, he immediately boarded a flower boat and quietly waited for someone to arrive. At noon, Ning Chen also arrived and boarded a flower boat. Ji Ming Marquis, please. Xia Mingri politely said. Ning Chen sat down and looked at the 10th prince who was about the same age as him. He was not in a hurry to speak. Ruoxi, come and pour wine. Xia Mingri said. Yes. Lu Ruoxi walked over. Her eyes were lifeless and had lost a lot of color. Ning Chen was still indifferent, and his expression did not change in the slightest. Xia Mingri observed for a long time and finally sighed in his heart. This Marquis Ji Ming really was like the legends, cold-blooded and ruthless, without the slightest mercy. Withdraw. Xia Mingyue finally decided to give up on this chess piece and softly said. Lu Ruoxi was startled, and her eyes instantly recovered. Looking at the two people, she didn't know where her courage came from. Ignoring the 10th prince's order, she once again knelt in front of Ningchen. Marquis, you are a martial marquis with great power, why can't you tolerate a weak woman like Ruoxi? Lu Ruoxi's face was filled with anger and unwillingness. Hearing such a bold question, Xia Mingri's eyes flashed with a touch of surprise. He had underestimated this weak woman. Miss Lu, what do you want? Ningchen did not get angry and calmly asked. A place to stay. Lu Ruoxi replied. I'll give you a chance. As long as you can give me a reason to keep you, I'll give you a place to stay. Ningchen raised his head and lightly said. Lu Ruoxi's beautiful eyes instantly lit up with hope, as if she was drowning and had grabbed onto the last life-saving straw. She desperately clung to it. However, after a moment, most of this hope quickly disappeared. The Marquis's request sounded simple, but in reality, it was very difficult. What else could a woman from a brothel have besides her body? She was not stupid and could clearly see that the Marquis had no interest in her body. Lu Ruoxi's eyes gradually dimmed. She really could not think of any reason for the Marquis to keep her. Don't say I didn't give you a chance. Although the Marquis's mansion is big, it does not raise idle people. This Marquis really can't find a reason to keep you. After waiting for a long time, Lu Ruoxi still did not reply. Ningchen indifferently spoke without a trace of pity, slowly pushing the former into the abyss of despair. Lu Ruoxi's heart hurt so much that it was difficult to breathe, but she still desperately wanted to surface. She struggled and said, Marquis, I can learn anything. The corner of Ningchen's mouth curved into an indifferent arc. No need, this Marquis can't wait. Ningchen's words ruthlessly shattered Lu Ruoxi's last hope. The cruelest thing in the world was to give someone hope and then mercilessly shatter it. Lu Ruoxi staggered, almost unable to stand steadily. Her beautiful face had completely lost its color. Chapter 144. Ningchen's ruthlessness made Lu Ruoxi completely despair. When a chess piece had no value, who would care whether it was gold or silver? Xia Mingri watched quietly without saying anything. It was a pity that this chess piece was lost. However, the target was the Marquis. If he was so easy to win over, he would be suspicious. The biggest variable in the imperial city was the Marquis in front of him. There was still a gap between his power and the third prince's, so winning over the Marquis was the most effective way. 10th Prince, you didn't ask me to come here for such a trivial matter. If you have something to say, just say it. Ningchen picked up his wine cup and asked calmly. Xia Mingri didn't beat around the bush and said bluntly, Marquis, I need your help. Why? Ningchen said lightly. The Marquis always has to choose between me and third brother. In the current situation, third brother does have a slight advantage. However, with your intelligence, you should be able to distinguish the difference between icing on the cake and sending charcoal in the snow. Xia Mingri said seriously. Ningchen took a sip of wine. When the wine entered his throat, it was scorching hot and intoxicating. 10th Prince, you only said half of it. The other half is that choosing you means I have to bear a greater risk of failure than choosing the third prince. Presumably, you should also know the consequences of failure. Why should I take this risk? Since ancient times, wealth comes from danger. The Marquis is already a martial marquis. The next step is to become the head of the generals. However, with third brother's relationship with Jingwu Duke, I'm afraid this position will not be given to anyone. In other words, if the Marquis chooses third brother, the best result is to keep his position. Xia Mingri said seriously. Ningchen was silent and didn't answer. He showed a thoughtful expression. The Marquis should think about it carefully. The difference in strength between me and third brother is not insurmountable. Moreover, I don't know if the Marquis is aware that third brother has begun to secretly contact northern men. Xia Mingri pretended to inadvertently reveal the truth. Ning Chen was startled and a touch of anger flashed across his face. Is this true? It's true. Xia Mingri nodded. His Highness, let me think about it. I will give you an answer in 3 days. Ning Chen stood up, glanced at Lu Ruoxi who seemed to have lost her soul, and turned around to leave. However, at this moment, something unexpected happened. A streak of light appeared out of nowhere on one of the surrounding boats, piercing through the wooden planks of the cabin and stabbing towards the 10th prince. It was too late for Ning Chen to make a move. At this critical moment, Xia Mingri subconsciously fell back and narrowly avoided the fatal sword. At this moment, Ning Chen finally reacted. His face was cold and murderous. 10th Prince, step back. Ning Chen's body flashed, and he appeared in front of the ghost-faced assassin. Xia Mingri didn't hesitate and immediately retreated to the other side of the boat. Seeing this, the demon-faced assassin stomped his foot and charged forward. Ning Chen pointed his finger and Ning Xuang also rushed forward to fight with the assassin. Amidst the frost, the red light was dazzling. The assassin's strength was much stronger than expected. Even someone as strong as Ning Chen couldn't win in a short time. The light in Xia Mingri's eyes rapidly jumped. He was wondering who wanted to kill him. Could it be that the 3rd prince was already so impatient? Bang! Suddenly, another sword light came from another flower boat. It was just as swift and fierce as before, causing people to be alarmed. Xia Mingri dodged again. However, he saw blood blooming brilliantly. It was so beautiful that it pierced his heart. Xia Mingri forgot that beside him was Lu Ruoxi. He could dodge, but Lu Ruoxi couldn't. The beautiful figure lightly fell down. Her hair scattered, and her peerless face carried a trace of relief. Perhaps, this was the best result for her. It's you who are courting death. Ning Chen's face turned cold. He flipped his palm and gathered his qi. All of a sudden, blue waves roared out. The cabin was shattered, and half of the Yin River started to shake. The waves rolled and gathered. Waves shocking heaven and earth unite. The supreme martial arts of the Zhongsun family appeared in the world. Monstrous waves crazily roared, each wave higher than the last. The whole world turned into water. In the Ling Yan pavilion, Su Fei Yan's pupils constricted. What a terrifying martial Marquis! At the same time, all the spies' expressions changed. The Marquis Ji Ming had actually become so strong. The 2 assassins didn't say anything and hurriedly retreated. However, it was already too late. Bang! Bang! The 2 assassins were dyed red and flew out. Blood sprayed out and sprinkled 10 meters away. Let's go! The 2 spat out a mouthful of blood. They immediately stepped on the water and flew away. Ning Chen didn't chase them. Instead, he went to Xia Mingri and asked, 10th Prince, are you alright? I'm fine. Thank you for saving me, Xia Mingri solemnly said. It's what I should do, Ning Chen politely said. The next moment, Xia Mingri squatted down and checked Lu Ruoxi's breath. He sighed softly and said, she's hopeless. At this time, the few guards who were secretly protecting the 10th Prince's safety also got on the boat. They all knelt down and said in fear, this subordinate came too late and frightened your highness. It's not your fault. Get up, Xia Mingri said. Thank you, your highness. The guards stood up and immediately stood aside. Since the 10th prince is fine, this subordinate will take his leave. Ning Chen cupped his fists and walked away. Your highness, what should we do with this woman? After Ning Chen left, a guard looked at Lu Ruoxi in a pool of blood and asked. Find a place to bury her, Xia Mingri lightly said. Yes, the guard accepted the order and wrapped Lu Ruoxi in a blanket. He then carried her off the boat. After dealing with these trivial matters, Xia Mingri walked to the bow of the boat and looked at the 3rd prince's mansion in the distance. He couldn't figure out why Xia Yanwu was so anxious. According to reason, he should be the one who was anxious. At the Jiming Marquis mansion, Kong Yu walked over. When he saw Ning Chen, he knelt down and said, "Greetings, Minister." Kong Yu's face was still filled with fear. At the last moment, he thought he wouldn't be able to come back alive. "You did well." "Get up," Ning Chen calmly said. "Thank you, Minister." Kong Yu stood up and stood aside. "Wu Go chose to take you. It seems he trusts you very much. I hope you won't let this Marquis down," Ning Chen indifferently said. "This subordinate doesn't dare." Feeling the coldness in Ning Chen's words, Kong Yu broke out in a cold sweat. After the battle just now, he finally understood how terrifying their lord was. No one would be able to understand that kind of terrifying power unless they experienced it themselves. Just now, if their minister hadn't secretly held back, he and Yin Wugo really wouldn't have been able to come back. "Okay, you can leave," Ning Chen said. "Yes." Kong Yu respectfully bowed and quickly left. Half a day later, Ning Chen was ordered to enter the palace and meet with Zhang Sunday. The two talked for nearly 3 hours. By the time he returned to the mansion, the sky was already completely dark. Yin Wugo was already waiting in the backyard of the mansion, his red robes fluttering in the wind. "Where is she?" Ning Chen asked. "In the room," Yin Wugo calmly said. Ning Chen opened the door and saw the beautiful figure lying on the bed. Her face was pale and bloodless. "When will the medicine's effect wear off?" Ning Chen turned his head and asked. "Tonight," Yin Wugo replied. Ning Chen stepped forward and took Lu Ruoxi's pulse. It was still extremely weak and almost undetectable. "Minister, if there's nothing else, this subordinate will take his leave," Yin Wugo said. "Look after Kong Yu." "I don't want any accidents," Ning Chen lightly said. "I believe in him," Yin Wugo sternly said. "I hope so." "You can leave," Ning Chen waved his hand. "Yes." Yin Wugo bowed again and quickly disappeared into the night with his blood sword. "Bad guy? Who is he?" After Yin Wugo left, Mingyu walked into the room and curiously asked. "He's from the imperial court," Ning Chen casually replied. Mingyu walked forward and after seeing the beautiful figure on the bed, a trace of surprise flashed across her small face. "Isn't this that Huakue? Did you really buy her?" "I didn't buy her. I dug her out," Ning Chen honestly said. Mingyu was stunned. She didn't understand and was about to ask when she suddenly noticed that Lu Ruoxi's state was somewhat strange. She couldn't help but worry, what's wrong with her? "She's injured. It's a long story. I'll tell you later," Ning Chen replied as he poured true qi into Lu Ruoxi. "Oh." Mingyu nodded and immediately stood by the bed obediently, quietly watching. After pouring true qi, Ning Chen and little Mingyu waited on the side. There was still more than an hour left, so they had to wait. Fortunately, with little Mingyu by his side, he didn't feel bored. Ning Chen explained the matter in detail without holding anything back. The people who assassinated the 10th prince were Kong Yu and Yin Wugo. This was something he had arranged in advance. As for Lu Ruoxi, it wasn't part of the plan at first. It was a temporary decision he made after boarding the ship. He had sent a message to Yin Wugo and arranged a follow-up plan so that he could take the opportunity to rescue Lu Ruoxi. The imperial court had many drugs that could make people fake their deaths. Yin Wugo's sword was also very accurate. The heart was half an inch to the right. This was his experience in killing people. Due to the limitations of the 10th prince's identity, he was destined to be unable to distinguish it. Through today's assassination, Ning Chen had a clearer understanding of the 10th prince of the Great Xia. There was no doubt that the 10th prince had always been hiding his strength. In this world, there weren't many people who could continuously avoid being assassinated by Kong Yu and Yin Wugo. The fact that the 10th prince was able to do it was indeed somewhat unexpected. Thinking about it carefully, Ning Chen felt that something was very wrong. Now was the critical period for the fight for the throne. The 10th prince had no need to hide his personal strength. Unless he reached the Xiantian realm, personal strength couldn't be a decisive factor in the fight for the throne. Moreover, the 10th prince wanted to rope in various influential people. It would be more advantageous for him to show more strength. There must be a demon behind this abnormality. The 10th prince's actions didn't seem like he was deliberately hiding his strength, but more like he was guarding against someone. This person was definitely not him. The 10th prince had been hiding for a long time. He had only become a Marquis not long ago. It seemed that the waters of the imperial city were much deeper than he had imagined. There were still many things he hadn't noticed yet. Ugh! At this moment, a painful groan came from the bed. Lu Ruoshi slowly opened her eyes. Her beautiful face was blank. The next moment, a calm voice sounded in her ears. This Marquis has given you a place to stay. Chapter 145. For the next 2 days, Lu Ruoshi recuperated in the Marquis mansion. Although Yin Wugo's sword had avoided her heart, a woman's body was still weak. This time, she had lost so much blood that she needed to recuperate more carefully. For this reason, Ning Chen specially invited the shopkeeper of Duan Pharmacy to come over. The shopkeeper was a direct descendant of Zhang Sun's bloodline and was absolutely trustworthy. Moreover, Ning Chen's relationship with the shopkeeper was quite good. At least, that was what Ning Chen thought. Young Marquis Ning, the medicine fee this time is 350 taels. Plus the 730 taels you owed last time, that's a total of 1080 taels. When are you going to pay it back? The shopkeeper asked indifferently. Cough, cough. Ning Chen almost choked on his tea. How could he owe so much? Shopkeeper, please have some tea. Ning Chen hurriedly poured a cup of tea and brought it over. The shopkeeper was not polite. He took the tea and drank it in one gulp before continuing, pay it back. Cough, cough. Talking about money hurts feelings. I'll go ask someone to prepare dinner. We'll eat here tonight. After saying that, Ning Chen ran away and disappeared like a wisp of smoke. On the bed, Lu Ruoshi was dumbfounded. This was the first time she had seen this side of the Marquis. It was completely different from his previous cold and ruthless appearance. The shopkeeper packed up the medicine box while saying, Miss Lu, don't believe the rumors outside and don't be confused by superficial things. Your Marquis is a trustworthy person. Of course, the premise is that you have to obtain his approval. After saying that, the shopkeeper picked up the medicine box and turned to leave. Tell Ning Chen that I'm leaving. I remember the debt. Tell him to pay it back quickly. As a dignified Marquis of the Grand Xia dynasty, he can't even take out this much money. Isn't he ashamed? After he finished speaking, the shopkeeper left, leaving Lu Ruoshi alone in the room in a daze. Half an hour later, a pretty maid came over with a pot of decocted medicine. She carefully helped Lu Ruoshi up and helped her drink the medicine. Thank you. Lu Ruoshi softly thanked her. You're welcome. The Marquis asked me to come over. The maid smiled faintly and replied. After a moment of silence, Lu Ruoshi finally couldn't help but ask, what kind of person is the knowing destiny Marquis? The maidservant blew on the medicine in the spoon and brought it to the former's mouth, whispering, Master Ho is a good man. You will understand after a long time. When Her Majesty sent me here, I was also very scared. Master Ho's reputation outside is indeed a bit scary. However, after getting to know him, I found that Master Ho is actually very easy to get along with. He never gets angry, nor does he make things difficult for the servants. If we have to talk about his shortcomings, it is that he is a little poor. At this point, the maidservant couldn't help but laugh and continued, our Marquis's estate is different from other places. I heard that the expenses of the estate are all personally transferred from the imperial household by the Empress. The Marquis himself doesn't have any money at all. After feeding him a bowl of medicine, the maidservant stood up and said with a smile, well, I'll go out first. It's late. I have to boil the bath water for our young master. Compared with Master Ho, our young master is more difficult to serve. After the maid left, Lu Ruoxi leaned against the headboard and quietly thought about the conversation between the shopkeeper and the maid. Perhaps she really didn't understand this Ji Ming Marquis who saved her. After dinner, the estate gradually quieted down. The servants had worked hard all day and had gone back to rest. Bad person, I don't want to drink medicine, it's too bitter. Inside the room, little Mingyu was throwing a tantrum. She had caught a cold in the past 2 days. It wasn't serious, but she was always coughing. No, come here quickly. Ning Chen naturally couldn't agree and chased her around the room with the medicine. This little ancestor ran quite fast. I don't want to. Little Mingyu opened the door and ran out, escaping from the devil's grasp. Xiao Yun, help me stop her. Ning Chen hurriedly shouted when he saw the maidservant coming over. Okay. The maidservant saw this and immediately went to stop her. Unfortunately, little Mingyu was already prepared. She bypassed the maidservant and disappeared without a trace. Usually, the servants couldn't enter the backyard and only the maidservant was allowed to enter. Once little Mingyu ran, no one could catch up. Ning Chen was still carrying the medicine, so it was very inconvenient for him to chase after her. After returning to the room, he put down the medicine and asked the maidservant to help block the way. The two of them cooperated and finally forced little Mingyu to a corner of the courtyard. Seeing that there was nowhere to run, Mingyu's big eyes rolled around and she ran into Lu Ruoxi's room. Clang! When the door was closed, Mingyu ran to the bed, took off her shoes, and got under the quilt without saying a word. Lu Ruoxi was startled and didn't know what was going on. Ning Chen and the maidservant pushed the door open and saw the bulging quilt. They knew Mingyu was hiding inside. Mingyu, I saw you. Come out quickly. Ning Chen said. No. Mingyu poked her small head out and shook it vigorously. I'm going to catch you. Ning Chen threatened. Come on. Mingyu wasn't afraid at all. She wrinkled her small nose and provoked him. Ning Chen didn't know what to do. Men and women shouldn't touch each other. In this era, the distance between men and women was too serious. He couldn't go up and lift Lu Ruoxi's quilt. What kind of role did this woman play in this? In this world, no one understood this woman better than him. It was because he understood her that he was so afraid of her. Chapter 146. In the northern Meng camp, a constant stream of information came from the imperial city. The hidden chess pieces that Fan Lingyue had set up over the past 7 years were all working at this moment. In the commander's tent, every day there were orders that were quickly sent to the imperial city through eagles. The spies in Ning Chen's hands were also constantly monitoring every corner of the imperial city, reporting everything that they discovered, not missing a single detail. The imperial city was so big that there were countless nobles that needed to be paid attention to. There were also many shocking situations. Every day, Ning Chen was quickly filtering through the huge amount of information, judging what was useful and what was useless. When the 3-day deadline came, Ning Chen sent a letter to the 10th prince, promising that he would help him ascend the throne. Both of them understood that this was just an attitude, but a kind attitude was always the starting point of cooperation. Ning Chen was very clear that before long, the contents of these letters would spread throughout the imperial city. With the 10th prince's intelligence, he definitely wouldn't let go of this opportunity to strengthen his own reputation. Moreover, the 3rd prince would soon find him again. This was a world that valued strength after all. Even the 3 dukes and the eldest grandson couldn't recommend a prince with no power to ascend the throne. 2 days later, the contents of the letter were made public. The imperial city was shaken. Everyone was shocked by Ning Chen's choice. Everyone knew that Marquis Jiming was the most trusted person of the current empress. For him to make this choice, did it mean that the empress had already decided to make the 10th prince the emperor? The 3rd prince was the most surprised person. That day, he and Ning Chen could still be considered to have a pleasant conversation. He didn't expect things to change so quickly. Men, prepare the horse. In the Divine Wind camp, Xia Yanwu's expression was grave. Yes. The horse was quickly brought over. Xia Yanwu quickly rode out of the Divine Wind camp, rushing in the direction of Jiming Marquis Manor. Jiming Marquis Manor. When Xia Yanwu arrived, the old steward was already waiting in front of the manor. When he saw the former, he directly said, "The Marquis left this morning. Third Prince, please come back another day." Xia Yanwu frowned. He waited for a long time before replying, "When Jiming Marquis comes back, tell him that I have something to discuss with him." The old steward respectfully bowed and said, "This servant will definitely pass on the message." Xia Yanwu left with confusion and doubt, as well as a trace of anger. In the Cloud Ridge village more than 700 li outside of the imperial city, a figure slowly walked over. Ning Chen left the city to avoid the third prince and suppress the bandits. The Cloud Ridge stronghold was located on the Cloud Ridge and was the biggest source of bandits in the surrounding area. The terrain was strategic and easy to defend, but difficult to attack. There were more than 4,000 bandits in the stronghold, and there were many experts. The imperial court had tried many times to wipe them out, but to no avail. The imperial guards of Great Xia normally did not leave the imperial city, much less be used to suppress bandits. As for the surrounding city guards, they did not have much of an advantage against these bandits. Ning Chen had never believed that there were mountain bandits that could go against the imperial court. The reason they hadn't been exterminated was definitely because of human factors. He sent people to investigate for a long time and found that there were level 9 experts on the mountain, and there was more than one. This place was too close to the imperial city. With such a group of people here, he was very worried. He did not care who had planted this hidden chess piece. Since he had found it, he would not let it continue to exist. The village was very lively. Ning Chen stood on a rock and watched quietly. Some people passed by from afar, but no one took him seriously. According to the spy's report, there were 3 fort masters in the stronghold, 2 men and 1 woman. All of them were at level 9. Their leader, the big creditor, had even reached the later stage of level 9. What surprised him even more was that the only female fort master was the head fort master. There were very few level 9 experts in the world. This could be seen from the Imperial Guards of Great Xia. The Imperial Guards of Great Xia had always been a gathering place for experts. However, even so, out of 10,000 Imperial Guards, there would not be one level 9 expert on average. Again, level 9 experts were not cabbages. For a small village to have 3 level 9 experts, even an idiot would know that something was wrong. "Sir." A woman dressed as a bandit walked over and bowed respectfully. "You did well." Ning Chen nodded and praised her. "Thank you for your praise." The woman lowered her head. "Get up. After tonight, you can leave the mountain." Ning Chen glanced at the village in front of him and said. The woman thanked him. After she got up, she hesitated for a moment and could not help but ask, "Sir, how many people did you bring?" "Just myself." Ning Chen smiled calmly and said, "It's just suppressing bandits. There's no need to make such a big fuss." The woman looked worried. Just as she was about to persuade him, Ning Chen stopped her. "That's enough. You can go back. I know what I'm doing." "Yes." The woman bowed helplessly and sighed in her heart. She did not know if Sir was too confident or arrogant. How could one person defeat more than 4,000 people in the village? Ning Chen did not explain. There was no need to. He had never planned on foolishly charging in alone. Yunling was such a good terrain. It would be a waste not to take advantage of it. On the plains, facing 4,000 bandits with many experts might have been a bit difficult. However, this was a mountain ridge. Horses could not run and people could not surround him. He had all the time in the world to kill them one by one. As the sun set in the west, Ning Chen stood on a huge rock and waited for the sky to turn dark. The reason was simple. It was inconvenient to leave the mountain at night. He could not kill too quickly by himself. Of course, he did not want anyone to escape. Night did not have much effect on experts above level 9. However, not everyone on the mountain was level 9. The worry on the woman's face did not disappear. She had thought that Sir would bring the green-robed guards or even the red-robed guards. She did not expect that in the end, only Sir would come. Night gradually fell. A light wind blew. As expected, it was from the east. Ning Chen stood against the wind. He pulled up a bundle of arrows from under the huge rock. He bent the bow of death and fired 3 arrows at the same time. His relaxed fingers brought out 3 beams of deadly light in the dark night. They silently streaked across the void and headed straight for the people patrolling the outermost perimeter. Poo, pu, pu. The 3 arrows sank into the throats of 3 people at the same time. There were no screams or cries of pain. Silently, the arrows pierced their throats. Blood sprayed everywhere. Ning Chen's hands were fast. He bent the bow and knocked the arrows. Unchanging, the black beams of light appeared one after another. There was no light or sound. There were only figures falling continuously. More and more figures fell. Finally, someone felt that something was wrong. Just as he was about to go out to check, a black arrow directly pierced his throat. The blood that sprayed out dyed the ground red. All that was left was a pair of eyes that could not be closed and a sense of unwillingness. The smell of blood drifted away with the wind. The people in the stronghold did not notice anything. The dark night was the best time to cover up a massacre. Ning Chen purposely chose the dark night and the position against the wind so that he would not let anyone go. This was a naked massacre. There was no resistance. The figure on the huge rock under the night did not show any mercy from the beginning to the end. His pair of cold eyes made people unable to see any emotions. Death became the only outcome. The stronghold was huge, but it could not escape the pair of emotionless eyes from afar. Wherever the eyes could see, the light of the arrows would arrive in an instant. Killing people was a boring thing. Killing 1 person, 2 people, 10 people, 100 people. After killing too many people, it was just a repetition. However, Ning Chen had already decided to kill everyone. Therefore, he was still very careful when he was killing people. 3 arrows were shot at the same time. 4 arrows were shot at the same time. 5 arrows were his limit. Any more and he would not be able to control his accuracy. Fortunately, his speed of drawing the bow was very fast. In the blink of an eye, he drew the bow twice in a row. The people who wanted to shout had their throats pierced by the light of the arrows in the end. 5 people covered their throats together. The scene of blood spraying out was very exciting and also very cruel. After killing the outermost people, the target continued to move forward. Ning Chen would let go of groups of more than 10 people. If there were more than 10 people, he would have to draw the bow for the 3rd time. This gap was enough for the remaining people to shout. On the huge rock, the number of arrows that were like a small hill decreased rapidly. It was less than half of the initial number. This meant that half of the people in the stronghold had died. Ning Chen brought enough arrows. He brought as many arrows as there were people in the stronghold. He knew that he could not shoot everyone to death like this. However, what if he was lucky? It was always good to bring more arrows. However, it turned out that this lucky chance didn't appear. A woman who was about to go out to splash water saw her husband who had just fallen and screamed. Although this woman was also nailed to the wooden house by an arrow that came later, she was also nailed to death. The woman's cry was very loud. It immediately startled many people. They all ran out to check, only to find that the outside was full of corpses. Ning Chen's arrows could only kill 5 people at a time. Taking into account the reaction time, he shot twice, which was 10 people. This should have been enough because it was very rare for 10 people to appear in everyone's field of vision at night. However, the woman's cry changed everything. Many people ran out, no less than 20. The matter was finally exposed. Ning Chen still calmly sent these 20 people to the Western Paradise. If they were exposed, then so be it. Before the people who could stop him arrived, he would kill as many as he could. Stronghold Master. In the stronghold, frightened voices rang out one after another. In the distance, in an extremely luxurious wooden house, 3 pairs of eyes suddenly opened. Hua Mu, go out and take a look. In the middle of the 3 seats, a beautiful woman who looked to be around 30 years old narrowed her eyes and said, "Okay." The leftmost middle-aged man stood up and walked out of the wooden house. On a huge rock in the distance, Ning Chen's hand stopped knocking an arrow and threw it to the side. The main character had finally appeared. The corner of Ning Chen's mouth curled up slightly. A silver arrow appeared. Suddenly, a fierce wind blew. The light in the sky gathered crazily, condensing into an unparalleled arrow. In the next moment, the arrow shot out, passing through the restrictions of space. In the blink of an eye, it arrived in front of the man in the middle. With a boom, it pierced through his body, bringing with it a spray of blood. How is this possible? Looking at the huge hole in his chest, the man in the middle struggled to move his gaze in the direction of the arrow. His blurry eyes could no longer see the figure in the distance. All he could see was the indifferent figure in plain clothes, like an azura in the night. The first arrow. Ning Chen counted softly. This arrow was not the arrow below him. He could not shoot too many arrows, otherwise he would die of exhaustion. Chapter 147. 1 arrow for 1 chieftain. It seemed to be a good deal. However, Ning Chen knew clearly that this could only happen once. Not to mention that this middle-aged man was the weakest of the 3 fort masters, the other 2 were not fools either. They would definitely be concerned about what was happening outside. Experts of level 7 and above all had very strong perceptive abilities. The arrow just now could not be hidden from them. A moment later, 4 level 8 powerhouses rushed out of the wooden hull. They were erratic and rushed toward the giant rock. Dark clouds covered the moon. The night wind was getting stronger and stronger. This was a sign of rain. Heaven was not on their side. It made these people face an even more unfortunate abyss. Under the dark clouds, Ning Chen looked at the figures rushing toward him. The coldness in his eyes grew. He drew the bow. The silver arrow light gathered again. The wind swirled. The arrow light flashed. It was the beginning of another massacre. These people could not be killed by the arrows below them. The 2 chieftains in the wooden hall asked these 4 people to come out. Their purpose was obvious. They came out to die. He could shoot 7 arrows now. He just used 1 arrow just now. Second arrow. With the power of heaven, one of them was dyed red. He was sent 3 feet away by the arrow light. Blood filled the air. Third arrow. Fourth arrow. Fifth arrow. 3 arrows flew out. They were all dyed red. The red color filled the sky. It was extremely beautiful. After the level 8, 5 level 7 appeared together. They also came to die. The 2 chieftains hiding in the wooden hall did not dare to show their faces. They restrained their breath and completely hid themselves from the horrible arrow light. They knew that this kind of arrow light must consume a lot of energy. There must be a limit. Otherwise, there would be no need to fight today. Ning Chen put away the broken death bow. His figure flashed and disappeared from the giant rock. Since they did not come out, he would go to find them. In a flash, the 5 level 7 experts were beheaded by a silver sword light before they could see the person's face clearly. Blood gushed into the sky and dyed the sky red. In the wooden hall, the young woman in purple and the old man in green looked very serious. They still did not know who the enemy was. They also did not receive any news from the imperial city. At this moment, outside the wooden hall, a white figure walked slowly. Although he was young, there was a strong pressure coming from him. Marquis Jiming. The young woman in purple cried out. Oh? Looks like you recognize me. If that's the case, then my guess was right. Ning Chen looked at the two people in front of him. Many people in the world knew his name, but not many really knew him. Most of the time, he was not in the imperial city. Even when he was in the imperial palace, he was locked up in the Weiyang Palace by Zhang Sun. The people who had seen him were actually the powerful officials in the imperial court. This young woman had obviously seen him before. Otherwise, it would be unreliable for her to recognize him with just a portrait. After all, a portrait was not a photo from the future. The purple-clothed young woman also realized that she had misspoken. However, a person's reputation was like the shadow of a tree. Although the knowing destiny Marquis had just been conferred the title of Marquis, his notoriety was frightening. Tens of thousands of Buddhists in the Buddhist kingdom were killed overnight. Even the Buddhas in the human world were nailed to Buddha Mountain and tortured day and night by the flames of resentment. Among the 10 marquises of Xia, the person in front of her was the most frightening. Marquis Jiming, you and I have no enmity between us. Why do you have to be so aggressive? The purple-clothed young woman said in a low voice. Your existence is a mistake. If I didn't come, I wouldn't have known that there were so many masters hidden in the small Yunling village. You really surprised me. While speaking, Ning Chen glanced at the figures hidden in the dark of the wooden hall. A cold smile appeared on his face. There were also level 8 and level 9 masters. It seemed that he had hit the jackpot. Marquis Jiming, if you leave now, we can pretend that nothing happened. Otherwise, don't blame us for bullying you with numbers. The purple-clothed young woman waved her hand and the figures in the dark walked out one by one. She immediately showed her weakness and threatened. She did not want to be enemies with the Marquis Jiming in front of her. Even if the Yunling village could keep him here, there would be great hidden dangers. Once the Empress of the Weiyang Palace was angry, even 10 Yunling villages would not be enough. Bullying me with numbers? I hope you can do it. With that, Ning Chen took a step forward. Immediately, the ground 10 feet away collapsed. The entire wooden hall shook and quickly collapsed. Take him down. Kill him. The purple-clothed young woman's expression changed and she said angrily. 4 level 7, 2 level 8, and 1 level 9 all rushed forward. They turned their palms and swung their swords at the newcomer. Clang! When the sword and finger met, the level 9 master's body stopped. The sword in his hand could not move an inch forward. At the same time, the sky was filled with frost. The 6 level 7 and level 8 masters were all stopped. They were directly blown away by the oncoming genuine qi. 2 fingers broke the sword and 1 palm forced the enemy back. The level 9 master was blown away. He spat out blood and his hair was dyed red. In this world, there was a huge difference between level 9 masters. In the past, Ning Chen had seen the invincible stance of the god's child on the way to the bride's wedding. That was the strongest person he had seen when he first entered the martial path. At that time, he could only secretly look up at the strongest person under the Xiantian stage. Now, their roles had changed. The once weak Ning Chen had become an insurmountable mountain in the eyes of this group of people. They were both level 9 masters, but he was so unattainable. Let's go together. The purple-clothed young woman did not dare delay any longer. She gave the order and charged forward with the old man beside her. 3 level 9 masters, 2 level 8 masters, and 4 level 7 masters joined hands. Their powerful might shook the world and sealed off all directions. Boom! Thunder rolled. This was the first thunder to welcome the beginning of summer. Tonight, it was the most beautiful song to accompany this battle of survival and slaughter. The purple-clothed young woman was already at the late level 9 realm. The old man was also at the peak of the mid-level 9 realm. With the addition of an early level 9 master, the 3 of them could even fight a peak level 9 master. The temperature around Ning Chen was getting lower and lower. His sword fingers flashed, bringing out a waterfall of cold snow. The purple-clothed young woman bore the brunt and faced the most powerful pressure. The sonorous sound of the sword was the collision of the long sword and the sword fingers. On the other side, the old man's powerful palm strength also aroused Ning Chen's fighting spirit. He turned his left hand over and the sky was full of waves. Palm to palm, sword to sword, it was a collision of moves, but more importantly, a competition of foundation. The three of them wanted to exhaust Jiming Marquis by force, relying on their numbers. Unfortunately, they fell into the most difficult and bitter battle. The foundation built by the Life Scroll was unparalleled in the world. Together with the Earth Scroll, no one under the Xiantian stage could beat Ning Chen in a head-on battle. Of course, there was one exception, and that was Fan Lingyue. So far, Ning Chen had not found a way to crack the white light. The method that could remove one's genuine qi was too incredible and there was no flaw to be found. However, among the people present, no one was called Fan Lingyue. Therefore, they were fighting very hard. Only one of the 4 level 7 was left. One of the 2 level 8 was dead and the other was injured. In this battlefield, those below level 9 were fragile and vulnerable, like the warm ice after winter and spring, breaking at the touch. Outside the wooden hall, the woman in bandit clothes looked here and was shocked speechless. She only had a level 5 cultivation, but she could clearly see how powerful their chief was. These level 9 experts, who were usually superior in her eyes, were fighting so hard in front of their chief. Boom! There was another clap of thunder, followed by a heavy downpour. The torches used for illumination in the stronghold were immediately extinguished. An atmosphere of panic quickly spread through the stronghold. The boundless darkness and the corpses all over the ground made these bandits, who usually killed people like scything flax, tremble. The fear of the unknown was always the most terrible. It gave people too much imagination. The reason why people were afraid of ghosts was not because people had seen them, but because no one had seen them. Ning Chen had seen them, so he was not afraid. In the eyes of people, ghost girls belonged to the category of ghosts. However, Ning Chen was very clear that ghost girls were not only not scary, they were very likely to be very beautiful. The heavy rain caused the smell of blood to rise. It was somewhat choking. Those who were a little timid had already vomited. They had killed people before, but they had never seen so many corpses like today. There were corpses all over the ground. The rainwater had turned the ground into a bloody color. Boom! The shocking sound of thunder covered the sound of the battle in the wooden hall. The remaining 5 people were more and more shocked. The person in front of them was actually so unshakable. Step back. Suddenly, Ning Chen pushed away the 2 people in front of him with a palm. He swept out of the battle and said indifferently. The 5 people did not understand, but the woman in bandit clothes outside the door knew he was talking about her. She immediately retreated several dozen feet away. The next moment, the frost around Ning Chen retreated. Blue waves covered the sky and earth. The rain outside was attracted and gathered crazily. Suddenly, the waves shook the sky and the sea and sky became one. Fury of the 9 heavens void waves. With a flip of his palm, a divine waterfall fell from the sky. The heavenly might was like the Milky Way hanging upside down, shocking everyone present. The 5 people were not willing to sit and wait for death. They used their strongest moves together to resist the might of a martial Marquis. 5 different kinds of splendor bloomed in the dark night. They were so weak, showing the most powerless resistance under the wind and rain. Facing the strongest person under Xiantian, even if the 5 of them fought together, they were still unshakable. The wooden hall was completely razed to the ground in the shocking collision. Wood and stone flew everywhere, but they were all scattered. Pu. With a muffled groan, the 5 people all flew out. The ground was dyed red. The 2 weakest people fell to the ground, but they could no longer stand up. The 3 ninth ranks struggled at death's door in the rainy night. Their hearts gradually sank to the bottom of the valley. A plain white figure flashed by. 2 heads flew up. The only one left was the purple-clothed woman. This was a very beautiful woman. Unfortunately, Ning Chen had seen too many beautiful women. Every one of them was prettier than the one in front of him. He kept her, not because of her appearance, but because she was useful. His sword finger broke her chi. Her cultivation was instantly crippled by 70%. The purple-clothed woman groaned and fainted. Take her down the mountain. Ning Chen glanced at the woman in bandit clothes in the distance and calmly said. The woman in bandit clothes walked over and picked up the purple-clothed woman. After hesitating for a moment, she could not help but ask, "Won't the department head come with us?" "You go first. I'll go kill the rest of them." Ning Chen spoke. His words were understated. There were no fluctuations, but it made the woman in bandit clothes tremble. She felt her entire body turn cold. Chapter 148. The Cloud Ridge stronghold had been destroyed without a single survivor. The mountain had become a dead mountain with corpses everywhere. Ning Chen descended the mountain in the heavy rain. His clothes were neat and tidy without a single drop of blood. The rain continued to fall, but it didn't touch his clothes at all. The woman in bandit robes carried the purple-robed woman as they walked in the rain behind Ning Chen. They kept quiet out of fear, not daring to say a single word. The imperial court was filled with people covered in blood. From the head of the court to the guards, none of them had ever seen such a cruel scene. Ning Chen walked at the front, his expression indifferent. He was a heretic's emotionless, a heretic's indifference. He had long since been covered in blood. He no longer knew what a soft heart was. It was the same yesterday, it was the same today, and it would be the same in the future. Yin Wugo was tired of blood and slaughter, so he had left him behind and come alone. If one person was evil, two people were also evil. Why should he let one more person sink into depravity? The heavy rain flowed from the top of the mountain to the bottom of the mountain. The two of them didn't look back. Behind them, blood dyed the mountain and the ground below red. It was a miserable and tragic scene. After returning to the Marquis' estate, Ning Chen silently washed his hands. Little Mingyue woke up and ran over, but Ning Chen gently pushed her away. "Mingyue, go to sleep. Be a good girl." Her clothes were clean, but they were still covered in blood. Ning Chen didn't want Mingyue to be tainted by that. He didn't know what would happen in the future, but he couldn't do that now. Mingyue's thoughts were sharp. Sensing that the atmosphere wasn't right, she obediently nodded and lay back down on the bed. The next day, Ning Chen left the Marquis' estate early in the morning. He went to the imperial court. When he arrived, he entered a dark room with the woman in bandit robes. There was a wooden cross in the room. A purple-robed figure was bound by chains. Her clothes were tattered and her hair was dyed with blood. It was an extremely miserable sight. "Did you confess?" asked Ning Chen. "No." The blue-robed woman shook her head. "Go out first and guard the door." "Don't let anyone in," said Ning Chen. "Yes." The blue-robed woman quickly walked out. A moment later, the mournful cries spread throughout the dark room, one after another, and continued for nearly 2 hours. At the door, the blue-clothed woman's heart jumped as she heard the cries. A bone-piercing chill spread throughout her body. When the cries stopped, she couldn't help but collapse against the wall behind her. The door of the secret room opened, and Ning Chen walked out. He said calmly, "Take them out and bury them. Don't let others see them." After he finished speaking, Ning Chen strode away. He was as cold as ever, and he didn't speak or smile. The woman in blue walked in and saw that the purple-clothed young woman on the wooden cross was no longer breathing. Her clothes were still intact, but they were stained with blood. The blue-robed lady took 2 steps forward, and just as she was about to reach out to touch it, she suddenly felt a surge of jinqi seeping out from it, causing her finger to be cut open. The blue-clothed woman frowned. She checked the purple-clothed woman's pulse. In the next moment, her expression changed. Just what had the department head done? The purple-clothed young woman's meridians had already disappeared. The jinqi flowed through her body, opening up thousands of new pathways. Blood rushed in, drowning all of her internal organs. What kind of torture could cause someone to be like this? What kind of person could have such a cruel side? The blue-clothed woman didn't dare to think about it. Her hands trembled as she untied the young woman. She was even more terrified of the young department head. Ning Chen once again entered the palace. He waited for a long time in the heavenly mandate hall before Zhang Sun and Qing Ning slowly walked over. Your Highness, please give me a handwritten order to enter the Imperial Mausoleum, Ning Chen said respectfully. What are you doing in the Imperial Mausoleum? Zhang Sun frowned and asked in confusion. Asking eunuch Pei to come out, Ning Chen said honestly. Are you crazy? Zhang Sun's expression changed, and she said angrily, if you go out now, you'll die. Ever since His Majesty passed away, even I can't control eunuch Pei. His Majesty wanted to kill you when he was alive. If there's a chance, eunuch Pei will definitely take your life. Your Highness, please don't worry. I won't die. Even if eunuch Pei wants to do it, it won't be in the Imperial Mausoleum, Ning Chen said seriously. No, Zhang Sun still didn't feel at ease and refused. Your Highness, eunuch Pei is very important. You must ask him to come out. Please give me a handwritten order, Ning Chen begged again. Zhang Sun thought about it and finally gave in. She said in a low voice, let Qing Ning go with you. Otherwise, there's no room for discussion. Thank you, Your Highness. Ning Chen nodded and agreed to this request. He also knew that this was the limit of what Zhang Sun could accept. The handwritten order was quickly written. Ning Chen and Qing Ning went together to the Western Emperor's mausoleum, which was more than 200 li outside the imperial city. The two of them walked very quickly and arrived in less than an hour. With Zhang Sun's handwritten order, the soldiers guarding the mausoleum didn't dare to be negligent. They bowed and welcomed the two of them inside. In front of the stone chamber of Emperor Xia's mausoleum, the two of them stopped. Ning Chen turned sideways and said softly, Sister Qing Ning, let me go in alone. No, Qing Ning said without hesitation, shaking her head. She knew very well how much eunuch Pei wanted to kill Ning Chen. She couldn't let him take the risk alone. Don't worry, eunuch Pei won't do anything here. Even if he wants to kill me, he won't take the risk of the mausoleum being destroyed, Ning Chen said patiently. Just what are you thinking? Why do I feel like I can't understand you anymore? Qing Ning looked at Ning Chen with a complicated expression. She was a Xiantian and could sense things that ordinary people couldn't. The smell of blood on Ning Chen's body was getting stronger and stronger. Furthermore, there were many things that he didn't tell her or Her Highness anymore. Compared to before, the shy young man who occasionally smiled shyly had gradually disappeared. Sister Qing Ning, you're thinking too much. I'm still the same person as before. Ning Chen smiled brightly, making it difficult for people to tell the difference. I'm going in. Don't worry, nothing will happen. With that, Ning Chen took 2 steps forward and pushed open the stone door. He walked step by step into Emperor Xia's mausoleum. The stone mausoleum was very large. It was even larger than the mausoleums of previous emperors. It was majestic and imposing. Every stone slab in the mausoleum was made of white stone mixed with green iron. It was incomparably hard and difficult to damage. At the very center of the stone mausoleum was a wooden coffin. It was extremely eye-catching. Without a doubt, this was where Xia Rui was sleeping. Old eunuch Pei was kneeling below the stone platform. His entire body was shriveled and withered, making him seem like an evil ghost. Eunuch Pei. Ning Chen bowed politely. Why have you come here? Are you here to throw away your life? Old eunuch Pei's voice was hoarse. It was like a piece of metal cutting across ice, causing people to shiver. I've come to ask eunuch Pei to leave the mausoleum and help me with something, replied Ning Chen. Old eunuch Pei was startled, but then he began to laugh crazily. His laughter was piercing to the ears. Ning Chen didn't get angry. He waited for the old eunuch to finish laughing before calmly saying, Eunuch Pei, you should know that it won't be that easy to kill me. Otherwise, I would have already died when Emperor Xia was still alive. What are you trying to say? Asked old eunuch Pei coldly. I can give you a chance. A chance to kill me. No one else will interfere. Just the two of us will have a fair battle, said Ning Chen. Old eunuch Pei snorted. Don't think that just because you've reached the 9th rank that you don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. The Xiantian realm is a realm that you will never be able to comprehend. Unless you use some underhanded tricks, you have no chance of winning. You don't need to worry about that. As long as you're willing to leave the mausoleum with me, I'll definitely fulfill my promise, said Ning Chen calmly. While the two of them were talking, Qing Ning was outside the mausoleum, paying close attention to what was happening inside. Half an hour later, a huge explosion rang out from within the mausoleum. Qing Ning's expression changed and she immediately charged in. She saw Bai Yi fly out, covered in blood. When she landed on the ground, she vomited a mouthful of blood, dyeing the mausoleum red. This is the interest you have to pay in advance, said old eunuch Pei coldly. Qing Ning's gaze turned cold. She twisted the two halves of her spear and was about to attack when Ning Chen stopped her. Sister Qing Ning, don't be impulsive. Let's go. Humph, Qing Ning flung her sleeves and helped Ning Chen up from the ground. They walked out of the mausoleum. The stone door closed with a rumble. Old eunuch Pei stood in front of the stone platform, an indescribable light flashing through his eyes. This child was truly extraordinary. In this world, there were many people who were ruthless to others, but there were very few who were ruthless to themselves. Ning Chen was undoubtedly one of those few. To be able to endure what ordinary people could not endure required great willpower. To be able to give up what ordinary people could not give up required great willpower. He would leave the mausoleum, help him this time, and then kill him. In a fair fight, Ning Chen had no chance of winning. Both old eunuch Pei and Ning Chen understood this, but Ning Chen still made this promise. Pfft. On the way back to the imperial city, Ning Chen once again vomited blood. The blood dyed his robes red. Hold on. Qing Ning supported Ning Chen, pouring her true qi into his body. She was doing her best to stabilize his injuries. I'm fine. Ning Chen grinned. His mouth was full of blood, and it continuously flowed down from the corner of his mouth. Don't talk anymore. Qing Ning sped up and rushed towards the imperial palace with Ning Chen. There were medicines in the palace that could help heal his injuries. After an hour, the two entered the palace. Zhang Sun was still waiting in the heavenly mandate hall. When he saw Ning Chen's miserable appearance, his expression changed immediately. Lady, I'll go get the medicine. Before he finished speaking, Qing Ning had already disappeared. Cough, cough. Bobo's blood dyed his clothes red again and again, as if he was paying back the blood debt of last night. The heavens were right and the retribution was not good. This mouthful of blood was not enough compared to the blood that covered the mountains and rivers last night. There was a big difference, a big difference. You! Looking at Ning Chen, Zhang Sun did not know what to say. He used the handkerchief in his hand to wipe the blood from the mouth of the person in front of him. Over and over again, he could not wipe it clean. Qing Ning quickly rushed back with 2 medicine bottles. She poured out more than 10 pills from them and stuffed them into Ning Chen's mouth. Immediately, she circulated her martial arts to quickly dissolve the medicine and stop the bleeding in his internal organs. After a long time, Ning Chen's injuries finally stabilized temporarily. He staggered to his feet and said tiredly, "Lady, I still have something to do. I'll go back first." Without a moment's delay, Ning Chen got up and prepared to leave. Do you want to die? Zhang Sun shouted, unable to hide the anger in his heart. Lady, this is a critical period. I can't stay any longer. Otherwise, it will ruin things. After speaking, Ning Chen bowed respectfully and said softly, "Don't worry, I won't die." As he turned and left, his back was full of exhaustion. Once, he and Fan Lingyue had different ideologies. Now, They were on the same path. One shoulder to bear the blame of 10,000 people, and one hand to rebel against the world. The evil in it, if you can bear it, you have to bear it. Chapter 149. 2 days later, the news of the Yunling stronghold's destruction spread throughout the imperial city. It was said that everyone who went up vomited. The entire Yunling mountain was covered in corpses. After a day of rain, the corpses were swollen. It was a terrifying sight. The Yunling stronghold had always been a threat to the imperial city. Other than the imperial army, the rest of the army had been mobilized countless times. Unfortunately, they all returned in failure. The Yunling Mountains terrain was too special. It was easy to defend and difficult to attack. Without carriages and horses, the army couldn't use their advantage and could only accept failure after failure. No one expected that such a place would be massacred overnight. A total of 4,317 people were killed. Not a single one was left alive. Other than on the battlefield, so many people dying at once was something that had never happened before. This was a strange case, so there were no survivors. No one knew who did it. Except for one person, Qing Ning. She could see the change in Ning Chen's aura. She was very sensitive to these things. Since the day Ning Chen entered the palace, she felt that something was wrong. She didn't expect such a big thing to happen. Zhang Sun looked at the memorial in his hand and thought. Qing Ning said softly, "Empress, it might be Ning Chen." Hearing this, Zhang Sun frowned. "Are you sure?" "It's very likely," Qing Ning said seriously. Zhang Sun was silent. Worry flashed through his eyes. Did he discover something? Why was he so impulsive? The Great Xia was a dynasty governed by the Confucian ideology. They were very against such things. Last time, when Ning Chen was conferred the title of Marquis, several old fogies in the imperial court were strongly against it. The reason was that Ning Chen had killed too many people in the battle of the Buddhist kingdom. It was unreasonable. However, all the soldiers in the Great Xia were paying attention to this matter. To the soldiers of the Great Xia who were bathed in blood all year round, these excuses were nonsense. If the Marquis Jiming's achievements couldn't make him a marquis, then who else could? Because of this, some of the old fogies in the imperial court had been dissatisfied with Ning Chen for a long time. If this matter was exposed, it would definitely become an excuse for these old fogies to condemn him. After a long time, Zhang Sun stood up and said slowly, "You don't have to pay attention to this matter. Ning Chen shouldn't make any mistakes in his work. Tell the shadow guards to secretly keep an eye on the movements in the imperial city. Once they discover anything, report back immediately." "Yes," Qing Ning replied. The Jiming Marquis residence was as peaceful as usual. The news of Ning Chen's injury had spread out at the right time. Many people in the imperial court already knew that the Jiming Marquis had fought with eunuch Pei in the imperial mausoleum and had returned with injuries. Many people were surprised by this. Everyone knew about the feud between Jiming Marquis and eunuch Pei. No one expected Jiming Marquis to have the guts to step into Emperor Xia's mausoleum. However, behind this surprise, what was even more shocking was the strength of Jiming Marquis. That day, many people in the palace saw Qing Ning bring Jiming Marquis back to the Heavenly Mandate Palace. Not long after, Jiming Marquis left. It could be seen that Jiming Marquis was not seriously injured, which was the most frightening thing. Among the 10 Marquis of the Xia Kingdom, only the head of the 10 Marquis, Marquis Kaishian, had truly stepped into the Xiantian level. Now that Jiming Marquis had fought with eunuch Pei and was only slightly injured, didn't this mean that Jiming Marquis' strength had surpassed the other Marquis and was close to the military god of the Xia Kingdom? In the world, no one would doubt eunuch Pei's intention to kill Jiming Marquis. This old dog was the most trusted person of Emperor Xia. As long as he had the chance, he would not hesitate to send this Marquis of the Xia Kingdom to hell. In the dead of night, Ning Chen came to the courtyard. 2 black figures appeared and knelt in front of him. They looked respectful and bowed their heads to listen to his orders. Keep a close eye on Duke Shiyu's residence and the 10th prince. No matter what, report back immediately. Yes. As soon as he finished speaking, the two black figures disappeared. The night wind blew gently, stirring up some sand. The empty courtyard was still quiet, as if no one had ever appeared. Ning Chen turned around. Just as he was about to push open the door and enter the room, he suddenly retracted his hand and covered his mouth. He coughed heavily and violently. Blood was glaring and flowed out from between his fingers. He couldn't even stop it. In a room in the corner of the courtyard, Lu Ruoxi, who couldn't sleep in the middle of the night and wanted to go out for a walk, accidentally saw this scene. She was aghast and her beautiful face turned pale. Lu Ruoxi subconsciously opened her mouth and wanted to call for help, but her eyes suddenly blurred and her red lips were covered by a large hand. Don't make a fuss. Cough cough. The oppressive coughing echoed in the courtyard. Ning Chen let go of Lu Ruoxi, but blood was still flowing out of his hand. A Xiantian-level palm was difficult to block. His light injuries were just for show. Let me help you in. Lu Ruoxi supported Ning Chen in a flurry and walked step by step into her room. Marquis, please have some tea. Lu Ruoxi helped Ning Chen sit down and poured a cup of tea. Thank you. Ning Chen took the cup and was about to drink when he vomited another mouthful of blood, instantly dyeing the tea red. Lu Ruoxi was frightened and at a loss. She didn't know what to do. In her eyes, the Marquis was cold, powerful, and omnipotent. She had never seen him in such a sorry state. Ning Chen only held the teacup and drank it in one gulp. He circulated his cultivation and tried his best to suppress the injuries in his body. Soon after, Ning Chen got up and glanced at Lu Ruoxi beside him. He whispered, "Thank you for the tea. Don't tell anyone about what happened tonight." After saying that, Ning Chen walked away. In the room, the red candle swayed. Lu Ruoxi stood there quietly with an inexplicable expression. It turned out that the invincible martial Marquis could also be injured. However, what they saw was always his most glorious side. It wasn't until this moment that the trace of fear and hatred in Lu Ruoxi's heart disappeared. The Marquis, who used to be aloof in her eyes and didn't care about the life and death of others, had fallen to the mortal world tonight. Perhaps he had his own responsibilities and difficulties that she didn't know about. In the next 3 days, the spies sent back information like snowflakes. At this critical juncture, Ning Chen didn't dare to miss any details and could only carefully read them one by one. There was no doubt that there was a problem with Duke Shiyu. All the information he got from the purple-clothed young woman pointed to the head eunuch of the Grand Xia. What he couldn't figure out now was what role the 10th prince played in this matter. Marquis, the Empress sent someone to deliver a medicine. Just as Ning Chen was lost in thought, outside the front hall, the old steward walked in with a foot-long white jade box in his hands. He carefully placed it on the table before him. Ning Chen frowned and gently opened the jade box. After seeing what was inside, his pupils shrank fiercely. 9 Wonders Flower. There really was such a divine item in the world. In the white jade box, there was a purple divine flower quietly lying in it. Its exotic fragrance made one feel relaxed and happy. It was rumored that the 9 Wonders flower had the miraculous effect of regenerating broken limbs. Except for the head and internal organs, it could quickly repair any physical defects. This was a divine medicine that only existed in legends. Who would have thought that it really existed? After a brief moment of shock, Ning Chen's eyes became slightly moist. He knew very well how precious this thing was. In this vast world, it was probably the only one that existed. Who knew how much effort and price Zhang Sun had paid to find this thing? That day, Zhang Sun said that he would help him solve his birth problem in the Heavenly Mandate Palace. He didn't take it to heart because he knew how difficult it was. He didn't expect that Zhang Sun would really do it. Ning Chen stood up and said in a deep voice, "Men. Here." A guard jogged in and knelt down. "Send this medicine to the Qilin Pavilion for auction." The starting price is 100,000 gold, Ning Chen said slowly. Yes. The guard immediately got up and took the medicine box before leaving. Marquis, you can't. The old steward was slightly shocked and hurried forward to persuade him. No need to say more. I know what to do. Ning Chen stopped the old steward from persuading him and said calmly. 2 days later, the Qilin Pavilion released a piece of news that shocked everyone. At the end of the month, which was 5 days later, the biggest auction of the year would be held. The final item would be the world's rare treasure, the 9 Wonders flower. This time, not only was the Xia imperial city shocked, even the world was shocked. No one would have thought that this kind of divine item really existed in this world. Because of this, the Qilin Pavilion specially sent a young woman to the Jiming Marquis Manor to deliver a golden card that symbolized the most honorable status. Ning Chen accepted it. Just as the young woman left, he threw it to little Mingyu as a toy. 100,000 gold was not a small amount. Those that could afford it could be counted on one's fingers. However, he wouldn't care about this, and neither would the Qilin Pavilion. His goal was to use the Qilin Pavilion to publicize this matter to the world, and the Qilin Pavilion would only take the opportunity to expand their reputation. As for whether the 9 Wonders flower would be auctioned or not, no one would care. The third prince has arrived. Half a day later, the third prince came once again. He was dressed in green armor, looking heroic and extraordinary. Brother Ning, are your injuries better? Xia Yanwu walked into the hall and asked Ning Chen, who was seated in concern. Thank you for Brother Yanwu's concern. It's no longer a problem. Ning Chen lightly laughed as he replied. Then I can be at ease. Xia Yanwu impolitely sat down himself and picked up the tea that the maid served. He drank a mouthful and casually said, That's right, has Brother Ning heard that the Qilin Pavilion is preparing to auction the 9 Wonders flower? There's actually such a thing. Ning Chen pretended to be surprised. Hypocrisy. Xia Yanwu sneered in his heart but didn't expose him. He continued, Brother Ning is recuperating in the manor, so you might not know. This auction is in 5 days. Brother Ning must grasp this opportunity. If you have any difficulties, don't hesitate to tell me. Ning Chen's expression also became serious as he slowly said, What's the starting price of this 9 Wonders flower? 100,000 gold. Xia Yanwu said seriously. Ning Chen's expression changed. He pondered for a moment and said, Housekeeper. Present. The old housekeeper walked over. How much silver does the manor still have? Ning Chen asked seriously. The old housekeeper glanced at Xia Yanwu, then walked to Ning Chen's side and whispered a number into his ear. So little. A hint of astonishment flashed across Ning Chen's face as he cried out involuntarily. Chapter 150. The two of them talked for a long time. When the sun was setting, Xia Yanwu left. He had shown enough sincerity and was only waiting for Ning Chen to give him an answer. He believed that Ning Chen would make the right decision. The situation in the battle for the throne was complicated, but it was also gradually tilting. In the end, strength would decide everything. After the third prince left, Ning Chen still sat quietly in his seat, drinking tea and pondering seriously. It was time for him to make a choice. Whether it was the third prince or the 10th prince, one of them had to ascend the throne. Mingyu, between the third prince and the 10th prince, who do you think is more suitable to be the emperor? Ning Chen looked at the little girl who was fiddling with the luminous pearl and asked softly. You're suitable. Mingyu said without looking up. Ning Chen was speechless. There was nothing to talk about. At this moment, the old steward walked into the hall and respectfully said, Marquis, someone outside delivered this letter. Ning Chen frowned. He tore open the envelope and took out the letter. Seeing the signature at the bottom of the letter, his eyes narrowed. It was him. This was a letter of challenge sent by Mu Qianshang. He was about to enter the Xiantian realm, but before that, he wanted to finish the unfinished battle. He owed him a favor. If Mu Qianshang had not let him enter Azure Frost Valley, he would not have been able to obtain the water caltrip flower. This time, he had to go. Mingyu, I'm going out. Are you coming? Ningchen glanced at little Mingyu and asked softly. Yes. Mingyu jumped down from her chair and put away the luminous pearl. She stepped forward and stretched out her hand. Ningchen took the little girl's hand and gave the steward a few instructions before leaving the Marquis' residence. How will manor? As the first prince to be conferred the title of king, Xia Zi's manor was also the largest among the princes. It could be seen how much Emperor Xia valued this eldest prince of the Xia kingdom. When Ningchen and Mingyu arrived, the 9th princess was preparing to leave. Seeing the two of them, she sat down again. How are your injuries? Xia Zi asked. He knew that Ningchen's injuries were much more serious than what the rumors said. I'm fine for now. Ningchen replied. Why are you here at this time? Xia Zi asked suspiciously. Has the ink sword been fixed? Ningchen asked slowly. Xia Zi shook his head and said, You still need some time. Why did you suddenly ask? With your skills, you can deal with anyone below the innate realm even without using a sword. Why are you in such a hurry? It's different this time. Ningchen said with a soft sigh, My opponent is Mu Qianshang, I have no choice but to use my sword. The young master of the Celestial Sword Pavilion? Xia Zi frowned slightly. He had heard of this person before. His sword Dao was self-formed, and even an elder of the Heavenly Pavilion of Compassion had been defeated by him. Now, he was only waiting for the moment to step into the innate realm. Ningchen nodded and briefly explained what had happened between them. It is indeed a little troublesome. Xia Zi said with a worried expression. Others were still fine, but this Mu Qianshang was a genius swordsman that only appeared once every 100 years. If Ningchen did not have a sword, his chances of victory were too slim. Given the two's cultivations, ordinary swords would not be enough. After a few moves, they would not be able to endure and self-destruct. The autumn water in Xiao Chen's hand was stained with too much of the Confucian sect's righteous qi. It would affect Ningchen significantly. Imperial brother, have you forgotten that there is another sword in the palace? I just don't know if Imperial Mother is willing to lend it to me. Xia Xinyu reminded him. Great Yin's green sparrow sword. After the 9th princess reminder, Xia Zi also remembered it and frowned again. This is a sword from the previous dynasty. Imperial Mother might not agree. Xia Zi said with some uncertainty. Ningchen thought for a moment, then stood up and said, We can't care too much. We have to try. Mingyue, let's go. Right now? Xia Zi was startled and asked. The time is tonight. Ningchen helplessly said. Xia Zi was startled. It seemed that Mu Qianshang was about to make his move. Otherwise, he would not be in such a hurry. Xinyu, you should also go back. Xia Zi turned his head and said softly. Xia Xinyu hesitated for a moment, but still nodded. The three of them walked towards the palace. Because Ningchen had something on his mind, he did not say anything. Xia Xinyu was a little embarrassed. Ever since the last betrothal, she had been afraid of being alone with Ningchen. Mingyue's heart was as clear as a mirror. She did not make a sound. She looked at the bad guy, then looked at Xia Xinyu, and then curled her lips. She felt that the 9th princess of the great Xia dynasty was not worthy of the bad guy. After Xia Xinyu felt Mingyue's gaze, she became even more embarrassed and deliberately avoided Mingyue's gaze. Ningchen also came back to his senses at this moment. He looked at the little girl and immediately understood what was going on. He lightly patted Mingyue's cloth hat and said, Little girl, don't let your imagination run wild. Mingyue laughed foolishly, looking as pure as a little white flower. The three of them quickly entered the palace. Logically speaking, it would be very troublesome to enter the palace at this time. However, Xia Xinyu and Ning Chen's status was not ordinary, so no one dared to stop them. The guards at the palace gates saw the tokens in their hands and immediately let them pass. Zhang Sun was not in the Heavenly Mandate Palace, but had returned to Weiyang Palace. It was not convenient for Ning Chen to enter the harem, so he could only wait in the Heavenly Mandate Palace. After waiting for a while, Qing Ning arrived first and asked him and Mingyue to wait for a while. After a long time, Zhang Sun and the 9th princess arrived. In Xia Xinyu's hands was a 5-foot-long mahogany box. It was engraved with dragon patterns and covered with a yellow turban. It looked very noble. Return it immediately after you use it, Zhang Sun said seriously. This was a sword from the previous dynasty. Logically speaking, it should not be used again. However, it was related to Ning Chen's safety, so she had to make an exception. Definitely, Ning Chen promised. Borrowing the sword went much more smoothly than expected. Ning Chen did not stay any longer and left with Mingyue. Be careful. If you can't win, just admit defeat, Zhang Sun said as Ning Chen left the palace. Ning Chen paused for a moment, chuckled, and then continued walking. Admit defeat? Perhaps he would. After Ning Chen left, Zhang Sun looked at her daughter beside her and sighed softly. Xinyu, mother hopes that you can carefully consider your marriage with Ning Chen. Don't regret it after you miss it. Xia Xinyu was silent and nodded gently. On the way back, Mingyue was tired and did not want to walk. Ning Chen had no choice but to carry the little girl on his back again. He had not carried her for a long time and Mingyue was much heavier. Bad guy, are you confident you can win? Mingyue leaned on Ning Chen's shoulder and asked softly. She did not understand these things, but that did not mean she could not see the worry in the other's eyes. The bad guy was still injured. Ever since he returned from the Buddhist kingdom, he had not fully recovered. Little Mingyue did not know that Ning Chen had been seriously injured again 2 days ago. Now, he was covered with new injuries and old injuries. Of course I'm confident. When have I ever lost? Ning Chen said lightly and smiled gently. In front of Mingyue, he always showed his best side. Mingyue tightened her arms and said softly, I'll wait for you at home. I won't cause trouble for you. Ning Chen smiled and said, when did you become so sensible? Looks like our Mingyue is about to grow up. I don't want to grow up. Mingyue did not say the rest. When she grew up, he would not be able to carry her on his back. A gentle breeze brushed past the two of them. The small cloth hat swayed, and the long hair within it carried the most beautiful trust in the world. In just a few short months, too many things had happened, but this trust and dependence had never changed. The two of them returned to the residence. Mingyue ate some food and went to sleep. Tonight, she did not pester Ning Chen to listen to stories. The Dayan green sparrow sword was stabbed into the stone slab in the courtyard. Ning Chen stood quietly and rested. He raised his fighting spirit to the peak of his life. This was the fairest battle since he came to this world. There were no grudges or interests. It was a battle of martial arts. In Prince Yan's residence, the legend of the Great Xia kept looking in the direction of the Marquis residence. The sword rack in front of him did not move. He thought that Ning Chen would come to borrow the sword. However, Ning Chen did not come. This was good too. This was a fair battle. He would wait and see what kind of brilliant sparks would fly. The most important thing for a martial artist was to focus. Ning Chen was distracted by too many things. Ever since he entered the martial arts path, he had never fought for himself. Once a battle was mixed with schemes and interests, he would lose too many things. He wanted to see how far Ning Chen could go if he unleashed his full strength. In the Marquis residence, the fighting spirit grew stronger. The Dayan green sparrow sword moved without wind and trembled slightly. In the next moment, the sword shot into the sky and drew a beautiful ray of light. It's here. A young man hundreds of miles away from the imperial city saw the ray of light in the sky and said slowly. In the imperial city of the Great Xia, many people saw the sword overflowing with fighting spirit. They were shocked. This sword came from the Marquis residence. Let's go take a look. In the Lingyan pavilion, Su Fian stood up and walked out. Yes, Qiu Lan answered and followed immediately. In the Divine Wind Battalion, Xia Yanwu walked out of the tent. After a moment of silence, he walked out of the camp. At the same time, in other parts of the imperial city, all those above the 9th rank came out. They wanted to see with their own eyes if the Marquis of the Great Xia was as powerful as the rumors said. In the Weiyang Palace, Qing Ning stood in front of the door with Zhang Sun. They looked to the west and prayed for this battle. In the West Hall of the Imperial Court of Justice, the red candles flickered. Yin Wugo stood quietly in front of the window. He wore a bright red robe and looked calm. He did not say a word. "Master, are you not going to watch?" Shang Han asked softly. He knew that Master was concerned about this battle. "No need. Master will not lose." Yin Wugo shook his head and said calmly. The moon was like a hook, drawing out the lights of 10,000 homes. Ningchen walked out of his residence, neither fast nor slow. After a few steps, he left behind a faint shadow. The great Yin Azure Sparrow sword fell from the sky and returned to its scabbard with a clang. Tonight, Su Yi was no longer bound by schemes. Her fighting spirit was sharper than a sword. After a quarter of an hour, Su Yi appeared hundreds of miles away from the imperial city. The moon at midnight illuminated the entire world. "Please." Under the white cloak, his demonic eyes were like the moon. This was the most handsome person in the world. His body and his sword were everything in the world. "Please." Su Yi spread out her arms. Her calm face was as before. Only her fighting spirit was sharper than a sword. The two strongest people below the Xiantian level were finally standing face to face. Tonight would be the peak battle for those below the Xiantian level. Bang! In the next moment, snow fell and the two bodies collided. Chapter 151. Demonic eyes, silver with a tinge of ink, a pure snow sword, white and flawless. With Mu Qianshang's sword in hand, heaven and earth wailed. The black sword flowed freely, each sword drawing a picture between heaven and earth, drawing a cage, trapping heaven and earth. Ningchen took advantage of the situation, his sword finger drew lightly, a silver light flowed, cutting open a cage, sword chi broke out. Mu Qianshang leaned to the side, with a bang, the ground behind him was cut open with a long sword mark, the snow sword turned cold, black and white covered the sky. Ningchen retreated, with a tearing sound, his plain clothes were torn apart. The two did not show any mercy, each move was a killing move, each move was fast, each move was dangerous, the brilliant battle dazzled the eyes of the spectators. Ningchen did not draw his sword, the great Yin Green Sparrow sword was still in its scabbard, however, when the sword chi from his two fingers drew across, rocks flew everywhere, the earth shook. The snow sword in Mu Qianshang's hand was also unstoppable, the black and white light from the tip of the sword swept out, the heaven and earth lost its color. The two strong forces clashed, the sound of metal clashing did not stop, the sword finger shook the famed sword, the earth shook, the void trembled, the space was already at its limit. Those who were also in the 9th level realm, even if they were at the peak of the 9th level, felt a strong pressure at this moment, facing the two people in front of them, they were not at the peak. From afar, Su Fian watched this shocking battle, her beautiful face could not hide her surprise, the power of the great Xia Jiming Marquis was well known, but without seeing it with their own eyes, no one could understand. "Miss, if one day we become enemies with the Marquis, can we stop him?" Qiu Lan asked with a worried face. "It will be very difficult," Su Fian said honestly. The Marquis of Jiming Marquis, no one below the Xiantian stage could stop him, the fifth string of the spring lightning could only be plucked at the Xiantian stage, just the power of the fourth string was not enough to stop this powerful Marquis. What was more frightening was that the Marquis had not drawn his sword, this meant that this battle was not yet at its peak, both of them were still holding back. On the other side, the third prince narrowed his eyes, similarly watching this battle. A marquis who was unrivaled in the acquired stage, was worth it for him to rope him in at all costs. Martial strength was not absolute, but absolute martial strength was the guarantee of everything. He did not have an innate master, which was his biggest shortcoming. Although Jiming Marquis was not an innate master, he was not far from it. More and more people walked out of the imperial city. It was obvious that this battle had attracted a lot of attention. In this battle for the throne, the existence of Marquis Jiming was always a variable. Everyone wanted to know how far this strong cultivator would go. White moon illuminates the sky. In the middle of the battlefield, the snow sword was brandished. The white moon was bright in the sky. A sword chi streaked across the sky. In this extremely fast martial art, an extremely beautiful sword mark was drawn. Ning Chen stopped in his tracks and condensed his chi with his sword finger. Frost filled the sky as he unleashed a sword attack with all his might. With a hong sound, the two swords collided. The heavens were distressed and the earth was miserable. Sand flew about chaotically, and the shockwaves rose 10 zhang into the air. Both of them took half a step back, but before they could stop, their bodies had already disappeared. In the next moment, an even more brutal confrontation ensued. Outside the battlefield, Qiu Lan was puzzled. She asked, "Miss, why is Jiming Marquis not drawing his sword?" Su Fei Yen frowned and said softly, "It should not be the time yet. His opponent is the young master of Compassion's sword Heavenly Pavilion. If he cannot raise his sword to the peak, even if he draws his sword, it will be useless. Both of their strengths have not reached the peak yet, but it will be soon." At this moment, in the middle of the battlefield, the ink-white sword chi was stronger than the previous one. The sword intent was finally formed. Mountains and rivers appeared. Between the mountains and rivers, the scenery around the two instantly changed. In this realm, you have no chance of winning. The snow sword in Mu Qian Shang's hand turned. His sword aura was even stronger than before. In between his movements, a strong pressure pressed down. It was so heavy that it made people unable to breathe. Ning Chen felt the space around him freeze. Before he made his move, he slowed down a bit. Ink-white sword chi attacked his body and in the blink of an eye, his right shoulder was dyed red. This Compassion sword Heavenly Pavilion's young master is really close to the Xiantian realm. In the distant night, Duke Xiu gently fanned herself. Beside her, Yin Ma Xiao nodded. He was also at the peak of the 9th grade. He could clearly sense the faintly discernible Xiantian aura in front of him. As long as nothing unexpected happened, Mu Qian Shang would quickly step into the Xiantian realm. These two people will be your strongest opponents on the martial path in the future. You must be careful. Duke Xiu reminded. Disciple understands. Teacher, please don't worry. Yin Ma Xiao's lips curled as he replied. On the battlefield, the situation took a turn for the worse. Within the landscape realm, Mu Qian Shang became stronger as he fought. Each move was stronger than the previous one. Each sword was faster than the previous one. The injuries on Ning Chen's body grew more and more. Blood flowed out, dyeing his clothes red. His injuries did not cause any hesitation in Ning Chen's moves. His palms shook the heavens and earth. His sword finger broke through the ink-white sword chi. Although he was injured, he was not defeated. Those outside the battle frowned more and more. Everyone could see that the Jiming Marquis was beginning to fall into a disadvantageous position. The wind and snow on his body could not hide his blood-stained clothes. Finally, the snow sword pierced his left shoulder. Once the sword entered his body, he retreated several zhang. Xia Zi came and saw this sword. He also saw the great green sparrow sword that was still hidden in its scabbard. Just when everyone thought that the Jiming Marquis was going to lose, only Xia Zi's eyes were fixed on the great green sparrow sword that was constantly trembling. He believed that before this sword was unsheathed, Ning Chen would not lose. Waves shake the heavens and earth. Ning Chen pinched the snow sword with 2 fingers, temporarily restraining it. His left palm flipped and raging waves surged. Each wave was higher than the previous one. In an instant, the entire world was turned into water. In the landscape painting, the water moved. The white water gathered and was guided by the blue waves, forming a huge blue and white wave that reached the sky. The landscape realm began to show signs of instability. The ink-colored mountain collapsed and fell down. Mu Qianshang's eyes turned cold. He gathered the shocking landscape realm and flipped his palm to meet it head-on. Instantly, the 5 peaks lost their color and gathered in this palm. With a loud boom, the world exploded. The landscape painting shattered. Amidst the sandstorm, Ning Chen retreated another 10 steps. Before he could stabilize himself, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Mu Qianshang retreated 3 steps. The corner of his mouth was dyed red for the first time. In this battle of palms, Ning Chen lost. But he had successfully broken the landscape realm that was drawn by the snow sword. Exchanging injuries for moves. It was not right or wrong, but it was the only way. This is the most satisfying battle I have had since I started learning the sword. You are worthy of my full strength. With that, Mu Qianshang took a step forward. Immediately, the wind and clouds around him swirled. The vast power of heaven and earth gathered continuously. It was as if a god had descended, causing every figure in the distance to change color. Innate realm. In this world, only the innate realm could mobilize the power of heaven and earth. This was the biggest difference between the acquired realm and the innate realm. Mortals could not defy the heavens. No matter how strong a martial artist was, they could not go against the vast power of heaven and earth. One step into the innate realm was like a fish leaping over the dragon gate. If one could leap over, a dragon would roar to the 9 heavens. If one could not leap over, a fish would swim in the shallows. This young master of the compassionate sword heavenly pavilion had already leaped over half of his body. Even if he fell, he would fall to the other side of the dragon gate. He would not return to the mortal world. Facing such a strong opponent, Ning Chen unexpectedly smiled. In his life, this was the only fair battle. Facing such a strong opponent, it made it difficult for him to conceal the excitement in his heart. As a martial artist, who did not want to have a fair battle? Ning Chen also wanted to, but he could not. In the past, he could not afford to lose. So, he could only use schemes to strive for every victory. Winning was necessary and also a responsibility. Today, the burden of victory had been lifted from his shoulders. He could finally fight to his heart's content. It had nothing to do with him. It was only a competition of martial arts. How could he not smile? 100 miles away in the Weiyang Palace, Qing Ning saw this smile. She felt an indescribable bitterness in her heart. She softly said, "Empress," he smiled. Zhang Sun was startled. Soon after, she deeply sighed. As long as he was happy. Clang! The great green sparrow sword was unsheathed. The sky changed color. Frost covered the sky and covered the earth. The sword force was at its peak. Even the sky could not withstand it. A huge crack appeared, shocking everyone. In ancient times, a smile from a beauty could topple cities. Today, a smile from a knowing destiny could shock the heavens. Battle intent and sword force. Ning Chen was at the peak of his life. This was also his strongest moment. This sword would determine victory and defeat. Facing Ning Chen in his strongest state, Mu Qianshang did not dare to be careless. The snow sword was raised to the sky. In the wind and snow, it bloomed with a poignant beauty. A bloody light rose and shot straight to the clouds. Half a day's remnant crimson moon. The strongest sword gathered the endless power of heaven and earth. At this moment, the bright moon lost its color. It was completely covered by the bloody light. On the other side, Ning Chen also released the power of 2 scrolls. The scroll of life and the scroll of earth. With the addition of heaven's might, an unparalleled huge sword appeared in the sky. It shook the 9 heavens and 10,000 gods. First defense waves splitting 10,000 li, the huge sword slashed the sky and shattered the space. This sword shocked the world. It surpassed the limits of the postnatal realm and was infinitely close to the unattainable postnatal realm. The two extremes collided. Heaven and earth suffered a calamity. The earth could not withstand the huge force and began to shake violently. Huge gullies appeared and stretched out for thousands of zhang. The 2 people who were sent flying were dyed red. Blood spurted from their bodies. Both of them were seriously injured. The final move was still a draw. After Mu Qianshang landed, he vomited a mouthful of blood. The snow sword stabbed into the ground and stopped his retreat. He wanted to raise his sword and fight again. However, at this moment, Mu Qianshang's footsteps paused. A look of regret flashed in his demonic eyes. Ning Chen, this battle ends here. I will wait for you at the postnatal realm. Ning Chen was stunned. Before he could understand the meaning of these words, he saw an inky white light pillar shoot up to the sky. The world was shocked. In the dark night, the inky white light penetrated the heavens and the earth. Everyone in the world saw this shocking scene. Postnatal realm. There was no doubt that this was a postnatal vision. It was powerful and heavy. It dyed the entire sky black. Ning Chen came back to his senses. His expression changed slightly. His figure flashed and he instantly appeared in front of Mu Qianshang. Almost at the same time, in the darkness, 3 palms shot out. They carried the power of thunder and crashed down. Ning Chen, who was seriously injured and at the end of his rope, forcefully used the last of his strength. He moved with his sword and blocked the power of the 3 palms. Boom! The aftermath roared. His hair was dyed red. How could Ning Chen, who was under the protection of a crossbow, resist the full power of 3 ninth-grade peak martial artists? The inky white light pillar behind him became more and more brilliant. In the light pillar, Mu Qianshang closed his eyes. His divine sense was tightly locked as he used all his strength to unleash the heavenly demon tribulation. With this Marquis here, no one can take half a step forward today. The sword on the ground trembled. Ning Chen stood in front of Mu Qianshang. On his shoulder, he once again shouldered the burden of life and death. Chapter 152. In this world, the Xiantian realm was high and mighty, and it was also feared by others. Just as Ning Chen had said, the Xiantian realm was a monster that should not exist. There was always a limit to the strength of a martial artist. However, at the level of an innate expert, it was no longer something that could be resisted by a human. Only an innate expert could kill an innate expert. However, there was an exception. When one first entered the Xiantian realm, the Xiantian phenomenon and the heavenly devil tribulation of the 3 calamities and 5 tribulations would arrive at the same time. This was a test of inner demons, and one could not afford to be distracted. Mu Qianshang had stepped into the Xiantian realm at the most inopportune time. For this battle, he had suppressed it for a long time, and at the final moment, he could no longer suppress it. This battle was very delightful. Even though there was no clear victor, even though he was in danger, Mu Qianshang did not regret it. Many people in the world did not wish to see an innate expert appear, especially when this innate expert was not on their side. Being able to kill an innate expert without any resistance was actually a very tempting thing. However, they didn't expect the Jiming Marquis to block them. There was no turning back. Since he had already taken action, he could not regret it. 1 death was death, 2 deaths were also death. Pools of blood flowed on the ground, some of it was Mu Qianshang's, some of it was Ning Chen's. The blood was mournful, forming tiny streams. Ning Chen stood alone in front of Mu Qianshang, his plain clothes stained with blood, and he looked like a lamp that was about to run out of oil. However, as long as this figure was still standing, no one present dared to underestimate him. The person in the dark made another move. This time, there was another sword chi. 3 palms and 1 sword. Their power was extraordinary. If Ning Chen was at his peak, or if he still had half of his strength, he wouldn't care about these 3 palms and 1 sword. Unfortunately, there was no such thing as an assumption in this world. Xia Zi, who was 10 miles away, reacted. Her figure instantly moved, and the autumn water filled the sky. With a boom, she blocked the palm power. As for the remaining 2 palms and a sword, it was unavoidable and unstoppable. The only option was to fight to the death. Wrath of the 9 heavens void waves. With the last of his strength, a divine waterfall fell from the sky, and the Milky Way of the 9 heavens hung upside down, blocking the 2 palms. However, he was unable to block the sword light that was rushing towards him. Ci. The sword chi entered Ning Chen's body. Ning Chen took a step back and stopped. He was not willing to take another step back. Blood gushed out from his chest, and the ground before him instantly turned scarlet. Dayan's green sparrow sword twisted to the ground and became the only support for the person standing. He had not fallen because he once owed the person behind him a favor. At this moment, no matter if it was those who wanted to recruit Ning Chen or those who wanted to kill Ning Chen, none of them made a move to save Ning Chen. Instead, they watched the development of the situation. In any case, these experts from the royal capital didn't wish for this unknown variable to survive. Normally, they wouldn't be able to kill him, but today, there was an opportunity to do so. They were naturally happy to see this happen. Xia Zi was 10 miles away from Ning Chen. When he blocked the palm strike, he was 7 miles away from Ning Chen. Now, after another 3 miles, there were only 4 miles left. For Li was nothing to a rank 9 powerhouse. However, at this moment, it was the distance that separated life and death. Another 3 palms and a sword broke through the air. Xia Zi was infuriated, his hair fluttering in the wind. This prince of the great Xia dynasty had never been so infuriated as he was today. Autumn waters slashed down, and this time, he was even closer to Yi Futian. However, he had already reached his limit and could only watch as the remaining 2 palms landed on Yi Futian's body. The sword that was twisted to the ground supported the figure that refused to fall. After taking the 2 palms head-on, she stood silently. She really didn't take another step back. Fresh blood flowed down Dayan's green sparrow sword and seeped into the ground. The sword of the previous dynasty had reappeared in the world after 1,000 years. For the first time, it was stained with the blood of the current Marquis. How ironic and sorrowful was this? In the blink of an eye, Xia Zi was once again 3 miles closer. There was only a distance of 1 mile between him and Su Yi. This time, Xia Zi blocked 3 palms. Or rather, these 3 palms blocked the path of this prince of the great Xia dynasty. The last sword was aimed at Su Yi's throat. No one could block it in time. Xia Zi couldn't, nor could the beautiful green figure that flew over from Weiyang Palace. However, at this moment, a snow-white sword blocked the sword light. It was like a pair of demonic eyes, so stunning that it was unforgettable. "Let me do it," Mu Qiansheng said calmly as he tapped Su Yi's body a few times. At this moment, Xia Zi and Qing Ning also arrived. They supported Ning Chen and stuffed 3 life-saving pills into his mouth without saying a word. The figure in the dark wanted to escape, but Mu Qiansheng spread out his spiritual sense. With a move, he immediately disappeared. "Let's go back." Ning Chen didn't care about these things anymore. He coughed twice and said in extreme exhaustion, "N." Qing Ning and Xia Zi responded. They supported Ning Chen on both sides and walked towards the imperial city. The people in front had already moved aside. At this moment, no one dared to block them. Before dawn, Ning Chen returned to the Marquis' residence. His clothes were clean and new. There was no trace of blood. In the Marquis' residence, no one knew what happened to their Marquis. They only felt that since this day, the Marquis coughed more and more frequently. Ning Chen took the extreme breath pill that Su Fian had given him. Together with Qing Ning's Xiantian power, he saved his life again. Your Highness, the sword is back. In Weiyang Palace, Qing Ning returned with the great green sparrow sword and said in a lonely voice. How is he? Zhang Sun didn't look at the sword in the sword box. Instead, he asked. Alive. Qing Ning said softly. Alive, that was all. Ning Chen had survived once again. She couldn't remember how many times it had happened. How many more times could he endure such a laughable and pitiful word? It's good that he's alive. Zhang Sun sighed deeply and said slowly. The remaining 3 to 4 days were when the 3 princes of the Great Xia came the most. Xia Zi didn't say anything, but the other 2 princes' motives were clear. The 10th prince was cautious by nature. He knew that a letter didn't mean much. Therefore, when he came, he sent gifts big and small. Ning Chen only asked one question, 10th prince, why are you hiding your martial arts cultivation base? Who is it for? The 10th prince was silent for a long time. In the end, he said a name. Ning Chen wasn't surprised. He had already guessed it. However, it was better for the 10th prince to personally admit it. After the 10th prince left, the 3rd prince came a day later. He was the prince with the greatest hope of becoming the great Xia emperor. Since he didn't see Ning Chen die, he hoped to pull him to his side. The 2 of them talked for an entire day. The content was nothing more than a transaction of benefits. The 3rd prince was different from the 10th prince. He was someone who was good at using small things to gain big things. Ning Chen could see that clearly. Therefore, he was even more careful. Have you decided? Asked Xia Zi calmly. Almost. After tomorrow's auction, I'll be able to make a final decision. Ning Chen coughed lightly. Xia Zi was silent. He sat there for a long time without saying a word. First prince, I can only do this much. The rest will be up to you and your highness. Ning Chen sighed. He looked exhausted. Even house arrest is not allowed? Asked Xia Zi slowly. He must be killed. The winner was king while the loser was a bandit. Since he was a bandit, he couldn't let him live. He understood the principle of cutting the weeds and eliminating the roots. Moreover, his opponent was a prince with military power. Do you know about the 3rd prince's contact with Beimeng? Asked Ning Chen softly. I do. This is clearly Beimeng's military advisor's trick. It can't be done for real, replied Xia Zi. A few days ago, I also felt the same. However, after thinking about it, this trick is very likely to become real, reminded Ning Chen. Do you have proof? Asked Xia Zi with a frown. I don't. Ning Chen shook his head. I'm still investigating. In truth, I also hope it's fake. The 3rd prince is indeed more suitable to be emperor than the 10th prince. Xia Zi nodded. After a long time, he stood up. It's getting late. I'll go back first. Imperial Mother wants me to tell you something. She won't interfere in your marriage with Xinyu. Ning Chen was startled. He sighed and said, that's all. After Xia Zi left, Ning Chen sat in his seat with his eyes closed. Waves of exhaustion came from his body. It was so clear that it was as if his body no longer belonged to him. In the backyard, Lu Ruoxi was still curled up on the bed. Ever since this stunning courtesan came to the Marquis' estate, she had become much more lazy. Every day, she would wake up naturally and walk around the backyard a few times. When she was tired, she would go back to rest. Other than Xiao Yun, no other servants were allowed to enter the backyard. Lu Ruoxi knew that her identity couldn't be exposed, so she never left the backyard. Ning Chen came to the backyard, knocked on the door, and entered Lu Ruoxi's room. When he saw the beautiful figure curled up on the bed, he said, if you're bored, you can change your appearance and go out for a walk. Lu Ruoxi smiled gently. After that night, she was no longer afraid of the Marquis. She reached out to stroke the hair by her ear and said softly, no need. I'm fine now. Ning Chen smiled and didn't force her. In the past, he didn't see that courtesan Lu wasn't a diligent woman. He guessed that she was forced out in the past. In the words of later generations, she was a standard homebody. Mingyu likes to listen to stories. If you have nothing to do, you can tell her about your past experiences, Ning Chen said with a calm expression. Okay, Lu Ruoxi said lazily, but, little lord really is like a little girl. Listening to Lu Ruoxi's seemingly unintentional words, Ning Chen's eyes suddenly turned cold and murderous. I don't want to hear this sentence again. I also don't want to hear you mention it to anyone else, Ning Chen warned. A woman's sixth sense was really troublesome. They had only known each other for a few days, but she had already begun to suspect Mingyu's identity. Lu Ruoxi heard Ning Chen's warning tone, but for some reason, she wasn't afraid. She smiled and replied, rest assured, Marquis. Ruoxi doesn't know anything. Your body hasn't recovered yet. Rest well. After saying this, Ning Chen didn't stay any longer. He turned around and walked out. Looking at the back of the former's departing figure, Lu Ruoxi was still curled up on the bed. Her peerlessly beautiful face was languid. She was unwilling and didn't want to think about anything else. In fact, she disliked using her brain the most. Chapter 153. In the silent night, the sound of coughing could be heard from a room in the backyard of the Marquis' estate. It was very soft and did not spread outside the room. The person inside the room was deliberately suppressing his coughing. Under the light of the lantern, a plainclothed figure was still staying up late to look at the intelligence sent to her by the spies. The imperial city was too big, and there were too many things she needed to pay attention to. People like the third prince and Duke Xiyu were each more cunning than the other, so it was impossible to find a direct flaw. She could only rely on some minor details from the side branches to find a breakthrough. In this world, there was nothing that could be done flawlessly. The difficult part was discovering it. After investigating the cause of the city lord's death for so long, there was finally some progress. It was now confirmed that Duke Xiyu had secretly ordered the city lord's death. The day before the city lord's death, Qing Marquis had entered Duke Xiyu's estate and came out in less than 15 minutes. Coupled with Duke Xiyu's secret plan in the Cloud Ridge stronghold, it was now certain that the Great Xia's head eunuch was plotting something. Marquis, Eunuch Pei has left the imperial tomb, a low voice sounded from outside the door. Understood, Ning Chen replied. Outside the door, the black figure disappeared without a sound, as if it had never appeared. Ning Chen was silent. Eunuch Pei's appearance was the final step. Now, he just had to wait for a decision. A person's heart was hard to predict. He couldn't make a judgment easily. He had to try again and again. Late at night, Lu Ruoxi woke up and saw the flickering light in the Marquis' room. She got up and went to the door and gently knocked. Inside the room, Ning Chen frowned and said, "Please come in." Lu Ruoxi pushed the door open and entered. Her plain face looked even more charming under the lamplight. In terms of appearance, this courtesan queen of the imperial city was undoubtedly synonymous with femme fatale. It was just that her temperament was slightly weak. In this era, women were destined to be the vassals of men. After all, a woman like Fan Lingyue, who was more dazzling than the moon in the sky, had only appeared once in 1,000 years. Marquis, rest, Lu Ruoxi said softly as she picked up the wick to make the flame brighter. Ning Chen smiled and did not answer. He continued to look at the situation in his hands. There was no such thing as a free reward in this world. He was not a god and could not predict the future. When Lu Ruoxi saw that the Marquis did not speak, she no longer tried to persuade him. Instead, she stood quietly to the side and helped grind the ink. Reading at night with a beautiful woman was every scholar's dream. Unfortunately, Ning Chen was not a scholar, but a martial marquis. Cough, cough. As the night deepened, the coughing in the room became louder. Lu Ruoxi gently patted Ning Chen's back, took out a silk handkerchief from her bosom, and handed it to him. Ningchen pushed Lu Ruoxi's hand away and asked, "Aren't you afraid that I'll kill you?" "The Marquis is a good person," Lu Ruoxi said softly. "Ha!" Ningchen smiled tiredly and said honestly, "I'm not a good person. If one day I find out that you've done something to let down the Marquis estate, I'll kill you without the slightest hesitation." "That day won't come," Lu Ruoxi said softly. "I hope so," Ningchen replied. 2 hours later, Ningchen finished reading the last piece of information. He closed his eyes in exhaustion and said slowly, "There's an auction tomorrow. Mingyue and I will be going. Are you coming?" Lu Ruoxi hesitated for a moment and asked, "Won't it cause trouble for the Marquis?" "Give me your hand." Ningchen opened his eyes and said indifferently. Lu Ruoxi doubtfully stretched out her left hand. Her slender jade fingers were crystal clear and flawless. Ningchen condensed a sword into his finger and a trace of true qi flowed through her arm and into her body. A moment later, the brilliance dissipated. "All right. Tomorrow, just put on a simple disguise and there won't be any problems. Even if a 9th-grade expert investigates, they won't be able to see anything." "Thank you, Marquis," Lu Ruoxi said. "Go back and rest." Ningchen waved his hand and said. "Ruoxi will take her leave." Lu Ruoxi gracefully bowed and immediately left the room. After Lu Ruoxi left, Ningchen got up and went to the courtyard. He looked at the bright moon in the sky and sighed in his heart. It was the end of the month again. He only had less than half a month left. In the northern Meng barracks, Fan Lingyue also stayed up all night. He stood in front of his tent and looked in the direction of the imperial city in silence. Under the moonlight, a graceful figure like a fairy blended into the world, as if she would break through the sky at any moment. These were the two most terrifying women in the world. One had the chaos volume, while the other had the travel volume. When they worked together, they were invincible. Even someone as strong as Ningchen, who had many things that transcended the era, had suffered a great loss at the hands of these two. After a moment, Fan Lingyue softly said something. The beautiful figure under the moonlight calmly nodded and disappeared in a flash. The night gradually dispersed and the first rays of dawn scattered on the earth, reflecting a faint golden color. In front of the Qilin Pavilion, there was an endless stream of people coming and going. It was the most prosperous scene in 100 years. The 9 Wonders separation flower was a divine flower that had always only existed in legends. No one had thought that it would actually appear in this world. Ningchen came, holding little Mingyu's hand. On the other side, Lu Ruoxi was wearing a mask that covered her peerless appearance, but it couldn't hide her exquisite and alluring body. The dignitaries who came today were all true big shots. Many of them had seen Ningchen before, so they weren't surprised at his arrival. Everyone in the world knew that Jiming Marquis of the Great Xia lacked nothing but this divine flower. "Marquis, please." A young woman walked over and politely bowed. Ningchen faintly smiled. The seemingly delicate woman in front of him wasn't as harmless as she looked. The Qilin Pavilion was one of the largest chambers of commerce in the world. For this woman to be sent to be in charge of this auction, her background was definitely not simple. The 4 of them walked into a private room. A beautiful maidservant was waiting inside. The woman said a few words to her before she turned around and left. The maid knew that the young man in front of her had a noble status and didn't dare to neglect him. She respectfully stood to the side, waiting for orders at any time. Ningchen started coughing again, one after another. It was very dull, and the 3 people in the box were scared witless. Bad guy. Mingyu's beautiful big eyes were full of worry. She stood up and used her small handkerchief to wipe off the blood on his lips. "It's okay. You'll get used to it." Ningchen patted the little girl's cloth hat and comforted her with a smile. "You, help him massage his back." Mingyu pointed at Lu Ruoxi and said fiercely. Lu Ruoxi was stunned for a moment before quickly coming to her senses and helping the Marquis massage his back. The young master's fierce reputation in the Marquis mansion was obvious to all. The most powerful person in the mansion wasn't the Marquis, but the young master. No one dared to go against him. This was the first time Ning Chen enjoyed this kind of treatment. He felt a little awkward. Men and women shouldn't touch each other. Was this considered taking advantage of him? Lu Ruoxi's technique was very good. Her strength was neither light nor heavy. It seemed that she had received special training. It wasn't easy to nurture a courtesan. Everything had to be taught. Otherwise, how could she deal with those picky dignitaries? The auction began. The auctioneer was the woman from before. She was wearing a gorgeous palace dress. She looked less gentle and more noble. Because of the 9 Wonders separation flower, today's auction was exceptionally lively. Rare treasures came out one after another. Except for a few big shots who were enduring, the rest of the boxes had already started to bid. Ning Chen was envious. Unfortunately, he didn't have any money. Zhang Sun had given him countless things, but he didn't give him any money. Ever since the war between Great Xia and Northern Meng, the treasury had always been tight. Talking about money with Zhang Sun right now was like pulling a tooth from a tiger's mouth. The last treasure, the 9 Wonders parting flower. The starting price is 100,000 taels of gold. At this moment, a stone platform made of crystal slowly rose. On it, a purple divine flower quietly lay. Suddenly, the whole hall trembled. You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.